I'd like to call to order the City of Marine City City Commission Budget Workshop to order on Thursday, April 11th, 2024 at 6 o'clock p.m. And now can we have a moment of silence and to send our positive thoughts to those in our community. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, your roll call, please.
Commissioner Bryson.
Here.
Commissioner Hendrick.
Here.
Commissioner Clausen.
Here.
Commissioner O'Brien.
Here.
Commissioner Roerig.
Here.
Commissioner Ross. Mayor Vandenbosch.
Here.
City Manager Atkins.
Here.
And Commissioner Ross did advise me previously that due to work, he would be running late this evening. Okay. And now on to approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Support.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. And now to item 5, public comment. Anyone is welcome to address the City Commission. Please state your name. Limit your comments to 5 minutes. And Commission will not respond, but we will follow up on issues as necessary. And remember to please address the Commission and me as the chair. Anybody? Okay. Anyone? All right. Nobody for public comment. On for 6, unfinished business, there is none. And on to now item 7, new business, the proposed 24-25 city budget. And I'll turn it over to City Manager.
Good evening, everybody. It's that time of year, just
Yes.
like Christmas. It comes whether we want it to or not. Here
Yep.
it is. So, thank you, everyone. Hope that everybody had a chance to kind of at least leaf through the budget and look at it. I know that this approach may be a little different for some of you than it's been done in the past, but it's all still relatively going to be simple. I mean, the budget is what the budget is, no matter where it is. However, I think Katie and I may have a couple of different ways to look at it. So how we would like to start is just a brief little summary to go over just some high-end highlights, and then start into a recap, and then go through, again, pointing out the major drivers, and then specifically get into the funds. At any time along the process, if any of you have questions, we want to be interactive, as comfortable as possible. We did put the memo out that said pajamas and house shoes and things, so you're really comfortable. But we're here as long as we need you here to answer questions. If there are questions that for some reason we can't answer tonight, we need additional information, we will do what we need to do to get that information. And I know sometimes, excuse me, from my practice, sometimes we can get into conversations that go from budget into more policy decisions, and sometimes that conversation is hard for any of us, myself included, to get back to budget instead of policy, because many of the things that you'll see in this budget are predicated upon best practices, best examples of what we have at any snapshot in time. So we may have talked about capital items that are identified, but yet those haven't been bid formally, so we don't have it down to the dollar. We have estimates, and there are other movers and drivers that change throughout the year. So we take what we have at a snapshot of time, and we're putting this together and use that information. So throughout the course of the year, as we know, we do budget amendments. There are often revenue changes that come by way of revenue sharing, ups, downs, peaks. So we do modifications as a regular basis. So this is really, as simply put, it's a roadmap and a guideline to guide us forward, subject to constant change based upon the activities of the city and economic drivers. So with that said as the summary going forward, and I think I'd given you a little preliminary cursor when we presented the budget to you, that we provided to you a balanced budget that is very modest in its approach. We had made no adjustments to the millage rate that we have, so it's unchanged, no increases. But I also think it's important to notice out to everybody that, by charter, originally when the charter was put in place many years ago, our charter allocation was 20 mills, but over a couple of mechanisms that are put in place by state statute, the first and the oldest is the Headley Amendment, that again, we are capped at a millage rate, and that millage rate over the years has adjusted down. So what may have started at one point, and this is pretty much the same in most communities, at an 18 or 20 mill cap, is now down in the realm of 15.5 mils, and that's because of the head leave process. We also have, as of 1994, a second mechanism, which is Proposal A that was put in by the state of Michigan. That proposal reflects economic factors that come in with inflation and adjustments and values of properties. At times, those two items in your basic budget 101, and a lot of you that have been here know that, sometimes they work quite well together, or fairly well. They've never really worked quite well, except in maybe 1994. But over the years, they don't work as well because we had a couple of extremely great periods of time with inflation, and the market was just on fire for homes. And sometimes when that happens, of course, the values go up. We see an increase in property tax values that equates to everybody getting a tax bill. Oh my gosh, we're paying more. But we're also limited again between that headly on our millage cap and the Proposal A on how much we can raise the taxes. So we could have 11%, inflation, that's just stuck with us, which at periods of last year we did. That doesn't mean that we realize as a city an 11% increase on the property tax values. So we are limited, usually, consumer price index or 5%, whichever is the lower amount. And Katie will talk about where we're at. So again, I think that's important for you all to understand, because you get residents and property owners that say, hey, wait a minute, I know my taxes are going through the roof because I had an increase. And there was an increase on the taxes this past year because of the consumer price index and inflation, but not to the level. Certainly everybody's feeling it at times. Geez, I've hit 11%, or I'm going, and now I think we've averaged, and we're somewhere in the realm of, yesterday's news 3.7%. In actuality, I think our average is somewhere 4.7 for across the past 8 to 12 months. But we don't realize that type of increase here. So we have to live within our means, and that causes a lot of confusion with people and understanding, thinking that, well, the city, my prices went up and everything went up, they're making all kinds of money. We're not. We're very limited. So what we have reflected in this budget is really to cover our means with some inflationary points held in for actual numbers that we know of. So for instance, we have employees through the Teamsters Union and through the POAM, the police officers, that have union contracts that are locked in at set percentage increases each year at 4%. Those wages that you'll see are locked in at that percentage. Whatever the contract is what the wage piece is. We may have put a placeholder in for other non-union employees equal to that amount or an inflationary amount, but those are adjusted through a separate process by individual employment contracts or by a negotiated or budgetary framework. So other than that, we try to keep with the inflationary factor, or we use kind of law of averages, that our expenses have trended along this pattern for the past 3 to 5 years. So we anticipate that we'll be along this average for an increase and use that for budgeting. Of course, again, it's a true-up process that we have to true up the numbers as we have them, and we do that through the budgetary amendment process. So there's not a lot of magic or fluff to it. There's really no hidden numbers, and we have a lot of placeholders in for, again, projects that have not yet been engineered or bid, or items that have been purchased. We know that the items may be X amount of dollars, but until we actually go through a bid process or using a competitive bid, we don't know. So for those of you who've been around for a while, you know that that's a customary piece. John, for yourself, who's fairly new into this, it'll be a learning process. So if there are questions that you guys think of course, tonight, ask them. If there's something that comes up afterwards, even if it's 2 or 3 in the morning, write it down, give us a call or something, or even email, and we'll get you an answer. But I just want you all to know and be comfortable. If there's a question out there, we're going to get you an answer for it. If we don't have it tonight, we'll get it. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to go through and again talk about the main drivers that have affected things this year. And again, I think I've covered where we are inflationary wise on an adjusted inflationary percent, where we are on taxes and revenue sharing. We're stable on revenue sharing this year. We haven't seen some of the peaks and valleys like we have in the past. But again, because revenue sharing through the state of Michigan is done on a two-way process. One is a constitutional number that's locked in. So when everybody goes and pays their 6% tax, there's a portion of that tax that is set aside, spelled out in the Constitution, of how it's distributed to local municipalities, schools, and other taxing agencies. The other portion, and again, that's a pretty stable portion, even though it's not the wealthiest piece. Statutory is the other portion, and that is the one that's more volatile for us. because it is set by the state legislature, and they can and do change that statutory amount annually, and sometimes even more than once a year. Again, when the economy was not so well at the state level a couple of years ago, those of you that were here, you know that we had cuts in revenue sharing, and they were pretty significant. And then we also had an adjustment period after 2008, and we had, it changes by the way, by administration in the state and the federal government, more in this case, the state, initiatives that were put on our plate, back in 2008, 9, and 10, that said, if you want this little extra of this revenue sharing, you need to do this and this and this. And those were known as unfunded mandates. It pretty much was, this is what you need to do. Sometimes you would be able to get that extra funds, sometimes you wouldn't. We still see those programs come from time to time. But those are the biggest pieces between property taxes and the revenue sharing that we use for the basis of our budget. We also supplement, when it comes to streets, we have what's known as Act 51, which is the gas tax. When you go to the gas pump and you pay your tax, a portion of that gas tax comes back to local municipalities. It is a small portion of that gas tax. So when you look and see 37 cents for a gas tax, we're not getting 37 cents for every dollar that's spent at the pumps, because it's also distributed to schools and other taxing authorities, to the counties. So there's a multitude of different revenues that come together to make up our budget, including funds and fees, and we'll talk about those fees and the fee schedule. We are very careful on making sure that the fee schedules here are in accordance with what is practical and what is used similarly in other communities. It is not a money-making, proposal to set and increase all of the fees in the backs of the residential users to balance the budget. So we're very careful, at doing that, but we do look at it annually and make adjustments accordingly. And we did that this year. Some that needed to be adjusted upwards because they were out of the realm of what the costs are, and others that were lower because we felt they were really just too costly and may in some cases have been causing harm to the city. So we'd like to kind of go through, if there are any general questions first, we can answer on anything that I just rambled on, and then I'm going to let Katie start to go in, and we're going to start with main drivers of the key funds, and then we will eventually get into the page by page. And on the page by page, rather than bore you to death and go through every line on that page, what we'd like to do is cover the main drivers within those budgets. So for instance, when we get to the city commission, we want to basically say these are the main drivers and changes, and then if there are questions, make it interactive so we can answer that. Because some of those line items, you're going to look at it and go, well, what's this $500 doesn't make a difference, or when we get into wages, there are formulas set for FICA and those taxes that we can't change, we just have to fill those in. So with that said, Katie, welcome to this big full first. I'll be out in the hallway if you need me.
So you'll see in the book that each tab is a fund, except for the last one, which is all the additional funds that we have. So I think it's important just to go by fund. Honestly, all of them are fairly easy to balance, other than the water sewer fund, and we'll talk about that when we get there. It is what it is. It's an enterprise fund. You're not supposed to make any money, but we still have to cover our costs. So when we get there, that's probably going to be the fund that we have the most discussion on, honestly.
And we will want to point out that we were very careful in putting those budgets together because we know we have this large drinking water project, and that was very much on our minds of how we keep those costs in check best as we can without increases, because we have a big project on the table that we're all going to have to face. So we'll go into more detail on that, but we were very conscious of that.
Yep. So I think general fund's the biggest fund. We'll go there. I think the most important thing with this is the revenues and expenditures. We were $81 in the positive, and I think it's important to note that we're not hitting any fund balance on that. So we're not going to our savings coffers and saying we need to take so much money out of our savings account to cover everyday expenses. So that's important. Not saying we won't ever if there's projects or things going on, but these are everyday expenses. So you see revenues came out to 3.541, I'm not going to say the whole long thing, million, and expenditures were 3.566 million. Some restricted funds being used in the general fund, capital outlay, land improvement for the parks. There is restricted funds for that, so we can use that for sand purchases and mulch and like everyday park improvements. And then also you'll see police radars. We were going to use the sale from the Tahoe, some funds for that. So you'll see that when we go forward. Just the general recap. ARPA funds, I know you guys talked about this at the commission meetings. And I think Scott has said too, in very near future, we'll have to decide on these funds, exactly what we're gonna do with them, because by the end of this year, we have to have them fully committed, and then spent within the next 2 years. So we'll have to start thinking about if these projects are the ones we're gonna go with, and if so, then those are the projects. We need to make commitments on those, so. Any questions on this first recap page?
And I just want to give a point of clarification too. When I talked earlier about the effect of inflation and the increases on taxable values, we're thankful that there at least was a small amount of increase on those taxable values that came back by way of tax revenue. But keep in mind that no matter what we did prior to even putting in restricted funds, we had to make a lot of adjustments in this budget because inflation outdrove the revenue increases by probably $50,000-$60,000. So we're very careful in making adjustments to be lean and be cognizant of everything we have. But that's a very tight margin. I mean, it'd be a perfect world if we could say, hey, we had revenue that came in because of these tax increases, revenue sharing, and we are spot on. It doesn't really happen that way, but we also aren't saying, hey, everybody, we had $60,000 extra that we played with. We didn't.
No, we had to
have
cut.
enough. We had to cover by making adjustments within some of those things we'll talk about. So.
I did include the balance sheet for each fund after the recaps, and I did that importantly because even though you've been getting these every month, they haven't been truly balanced until about 2 months ago. So we are April 10th, and March has been balanced. So we know these numbers are legit. And they also showed the fund balance. So it says ending fund balance after liabilities 3.686. That could change, based on the audit numbers and expenses. And money we use out of the restricted funds, really, which is on the second page. I wish I could have a projection. The second page shows, it says fund balance here, and it shows all the restricted funds and our unearned revenue. These are all those funds we have set aside that can only be used for specific projects. So those can't just be, oh, we're short, we gotta use them. They have to be used for specific things. So we restrict them when we put them here, and they're part of the fund balance. But ultimately, they're tight. The money's tight with that. You can't just use it.
So you can see that Katie has put titles in there. So for instance, when you see a road tax fund, it's a portion from, a county or
Yep.
road taxes that come through that can only be used for that purpose. Or if we received a grant that was from T-Mobile, for instance, $50,000 to be used for Totlet, that's restricted. You can only use it for that. So that portion is indicated. I also think it's important that when you do see a reflection of fund balance, in many cases, the reason why we're reflecting fund balance is we had certain items that we were able to come in under budget last year and roll that forward to fund balance, or we had some items that just ended up not being purchased to roll forward. But we do have, and I want everyone to feel safe, that we have a very good fund balance that a community of our size should have. And when it's referred to often as a rainy day fund, we don't want the rainy day to come. They do, but we also know that we have to keep this at a solid level because it's a go forward moving from year to year.
You had a question? No?
He answered it.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I guess we'll go right into it. Revenues first. We always talk about the positive first, right? The revenues. So I did highlight everything in blue, that like the big main numbers, the drivers on these. When I did, we're gonna have a Headley rollback this time, so a millage reduction. We are actually gonna end up getting less tax revenue in this year than we did last year, based on that. Just because housing prices are going up, we're not taxing any different, and then we have a brownfield payment we also have to make. So, I mean, it's not much. I think it's like a $1,200 swing, but we end up at 1.890118 million coming in for that, and that's our main revenue source in the general fund.
This was that point that I talked about in the intro discussion, that when you have a high inflation and you have an increase in the taxable values, that's usually when the Headley piece kicks in for a more significant rollback. Last year, we didn't have that high of an inflationary adjustment, and we had no change on the Headley rollback. Our 1 mil was truly 1 mil.
Yeah, and now it's .9872.
Correct, and that's because we're again, in those two items that are there, one a constitutional amendment, another a statutory piece. In some cases, they don't always work to our advantage of being able to build, and this is that case, we have to do a slight adjustment.
To put a fine point on this one, while we're collecting less taxes, our citizens are not increased in any way of what they're paying for this.
There's no increase in the taxes at all, actually, that amount is, you know, the millage rate is less.
Their bills
They may
may,
pay a little bit more on the tax value because their home value went up. But again, we're limited at what we can get from the city on this piece, and that's what that checks and balances.
Thank
is. And we then still have to live within our means of operating full police, fire, you know, public works services, no matter what we have on that, within that framework.
yeah, so the increase isn't always because the increase is coming from us, it's because the multiplier is higher, basically, the value. And then the other major footnote I put in here for building department permits, this is such a guesstimate sometimes. I know there may be some larger projects in the works. If they are, this number could increase significantly, depending on that. So we kind of, we played it
We're conservative.
really conservative
We're
at this point.
very conservative. We would be thankful if some bigger scale projects come in, because
Mm-hmm.
it's extra revenue for the city that we could use for other expenses and activities, providing of services. But until a permit is pulled, until construction starts, it's nothing more than a wish, a request, and then often it is a one-time snapshot. So if a project comes in and builds during this tax year, that doesn't mean there's the same level of taxes that are, same level of permits and fees that are coming in next year. So we have to be very,
Yeah.
very careful on that, but again, those are the peaks and valleys.
In that scenario, we got to discuss anyway with that building department,
Yeah.
where those fees are going, because we're losing most of our fees.
And these are the things that, Commissioner, that I mentioned at the beginning. I think that a lot of our conversation here, and even getting through when we adopt the budget, we have policy discussions and decisions that have to be made along the road for the future of the city. What are we doing with certain departments and operations? What are we needing to do for capital long-term planning? I mean, we're setting in a beautiful, newer city facility. The roof doesn't last forever. And, you know, so a lot of these are gonna be policy decisions that we have to drive even beyond, on a regular basis, to go forward.
The next,
point.
yep. The next main one, Scott already discussed it, was the sales tax and CVT payment from the state. That number, they already give us that number, so we're going up a little bit, about 9,000 on that. That's one of our main revenues. And then I also, in refuse, is another main revenue. Of course, we end up paying out money to Emterra to pick up the refuse, but that's another indicator. There was an issue with the 2022 tax roll where we have to take the $12,000 hit this year to correct that. So
Okay.
I did note that in there. It happens.
And that will happen from time to time.
Yep.
We have a property that could potentially go into a tax foreclosure, and they have significant fees that we've assessed for utility bills,
Yeah.
for blight, for lawn care. And when that gets, the smaller amounts are usually rolled over at the county level, and we're made whole. Those are in the hundreds. But when it crosses a threshold that it's in the thousands, it is incumbent upon us then to have to go and collect this. And usually we'll get that revenue. The property's going to sell. It's a lien on the property. But we're not getting it dispersed back from the county like we do the smaller amounts. So in this case, that's what you're looking at. So, you know, we have to become collection agents on these pieces. Not a big amount of money, but it is, in the total, not a big amount of money. But any piece of money is significant for us to go after. And when it's in the thousands, yeah, we have to, we have to play through the process of tax foreclosure and sale of property, and then it's like a mortgage or a lien that has to be satisfied before the property can change hands for us to get our money back.
Okay.
Not highlighted, but I did want to put in there, we do have investment, excuse me, gains or losses unrealized in there for 60,000. I didn't put a projected in. It really depends on some decisions made here with investing funds, which you'll probably see next week. But secure, our investments are doing well, and if we can make more money off our fund balance, we probably should, in order to, carve out that little piece of expenses we couldn't cover. And honestly, this number, when he talked about where we had to cut a little bit, having some more interest gains and losses, that helped us not do that as much. So our investments are working.
And when you see in that line item as it's spelled out, where you see the projection of the 60,000 at the end for the budget, you look at the column, showing 13,000, I mean, this is
It's
showing
since
that
October.
the fruits of our labors are paying off. We've had money that we do need to have liquidity, so if we have expenses, but when that money is not being used for certain payments, we're doing the right thing. You guys have entrusted and authorized us to do the right thing by earning interest money according to state statute on this, and $13,000, pretty good. We had goose eggs, as you can see before, there's nothing there.
Oh, yeah.
We weren't earning.
Yeah.
This is helping us fill almost, if it works as we
The gap.
hope, fill the entire gap of where we were in the difference between revenue and expense in the budget, and that is amazing. It's just-
The last main, the interfund transfer in, these are funds that have been being put aside, and this is a capital improvement fund for a new dump truck, and this year we're just moving them from that fund into the general fund in order to complete that purchase. So, that's what that is. Any questions on any of the other revenues? No?
No, I'll wait till I get to them.
Expenses?
Trust me, they'll be quick.
Yeah.
We just want to get too fast.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah. All right, so the next
Wait.
fund is the city commission. This didn't sway a whole lot,
No.
but
No.
we,
Actually, it went down
It went-
$200, a couple
yeah,
$100.
a little bit.
Here's my question on the business cards. Do we really need, I mean, I got a whole box of these things. Do we really need,
we're gonna I think the idea is we'll use them till they're gone, right?
yeah, I mean.
And then
you're not
update, or if
ordering
new
any
ones come on.
ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I still
We-
gotta,
We have a design
And
that
I
we
give
did
them all,
on
but-
Vistaprint, and actually the cost of them is way cheaper.
cheaper, okay.
So,
all
and they
right.
send coupons
And-
and all those
all right.
things, so,
And we think in the past, too many of them were ordered at one time,
yeah.
Yeah.
because we have some for commissioners that are
Yeah.
no longer on the boards.
Yeah, yeah. So it allows us to order smaller amounts at a lesser price.
Okay,
So that kind
Yeah.
of was
I give a
just
lot
kind
out,
of like
but-
a note in there that we would like to get new ones as they run out. So
okay.
start giving them out, I guess.
I have a pedantic question. On the revenue pages, one of the last items there, footnote amounts, SEMOG, Chamber of Commerce, EDA, et cetera. Is that SEMOG or is that supposed to be SEMCOG?
SEMCOG, sorry, typo.
Budget cuts, we cut some others too.
No, that was an
I'm not trying to be pedantic
No,
about your typing.
Good.
It's if there's something else that I don't know about
Yeah,
that I'm trying to
SEMCOG.
figure out. That's
Yeah.
all.
Some other acronym that.
Yeah, there's
figure
way
out.
too many.
There likely could be, and we don't, want
I
them
said
to-
I'm sure other people have different ideas for it.
Yeah. So any questions on this one?
No.
No? Okay. City manager budget, he can probably talk about this a little more. Nothing changed really except for possibly the wages and,
Yeah, the only piece that you really see reflected on here between the proposed 106 of this year and the 120 is the difference, the potential difference between a salary piece for a new manager coming in board. So even though we know we're gonna set a salary framework, and I think we've talked about it, it was even a little bit lower than what we talked about a year ago. You know, if you're between the 105 and the 120 piece, and that is split between other departments, you still have FICA that's at a certain percentage, you still have work comp. So when you generate that change in the one column, it does generate the other changes. But really, the only other pieces that you would see is I think we did some adjustments in here that if you are getting potentially a new manager at some point to come on board, you're probably going to pay a little bit more for some conferences, training, and education that we put in. So you'll see some of those that will be just kind of a blip coming in. But again, it's a very reasonable amount, and we'll cover this again a little bit later on. Keep in mind that, in particular with the city manager's position, you have a portion that's paid out of general fund. You have these very small percentages that are paid out of water, sewer, and streets, because there's administrative work that's done for those departments. So we kind of take a little bit in from everybody. Police chief can give me extra if he wants, we'll put it in this budget, thank you. But that's how it works. This
You don't got
manager,
it.
because there's multi-pieces that we turn around. So when you see an amount here, there are some other amounts that are going to be found in other portions of budgets.
Okay, so in the event we have somebody new, we don't have anything in the health insurance and the OPEB.
yeah, I mean, we had to kind of decide on that, if we were going to
I mean-
either put it in the opt-out option or put it in that they're gonna get insurance. And I think you said most likely somebody,
In many cases, a lot of managers,
they've already
if
have
they have
their,
a spouse or have somebody else, or if they retire, or whatever the case may be, they probably have some insurance. So we felt safe at putting the opt-out in. Now, again, if they come in and they don't have that, then we'll have to do a budget adjustment according, to what their needs are in the health insurance. But I also think that, again, in the scheme of things, there's a lot at play that when you go through an interviewing process, does this person have tenured experience? Are they gonna start at the top end, or are they gonna start in the middle a little bit?
Okay.
So it's hard for us right now to know what that number would be, but we felt we safely can put in that placeholder in on the opt-out, and then if it has to be moved from opt-out to health insurance coverage, then
We'll
single,
adjust.
is it single coverage, is it couple family coverage? Those pieces we really didn't know yet, so there could potentially be.
and the salary could be negotiated because of that,
Right.
depending on their
The-
situation.
Yeah, in the
Yeah,
contract,
right,
the
a lot of-
package.
A lot of factors, and again, the
Yeah.
other thing too, let's say for instance, we have a $10,000 healthcare policy. Well, the whole 10,000 doesn't come out of the general fund, there's again, prorated pieces that come out. But until we know that snapshot, so you could see an adjustment that could be $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 if it's insurance coverage versus opt-out. We just aren't there yet to know.
Okay.
One
All right.
thing across the board, you'll see in every fund, office supplies may be up this year, and then this previous year, and then lowered again this year. I think we all felt that we got the cabinets we needed, we got, everything we needed to do our jobs last year, and then like this year would be just the everyday supplies you need to do your job. So, in my instance, I needed file cabinets last year.
Yeah.
Mine were non-existent, so.
And a
You know.
huge savings in paper.
That is true. We're doing so much
So you'll see that
electronically, too.
across the board.
I
Yeah.
know you talked about it, your last meeting about possibly contracting. What about that?
So you'll find that in other areas of the budget where we
Okay.
put in where it'd be applicable, certain portions towards either professional or
Okay,
contractual services.
that's where you're
So
gonna put it?
Community economic development, some of it would be engineering, some of it would be roads. Depending on what the tasks are is where that portion for contractual or part-time would be distributed. We had a debate on this too, because we
Yeah.
talked about, should we put a category in one of these line items that would be a part-time wage? We felt, no, it's probably better to do it as contractual professional services, because we would allocate those out
Okay.
based upon the task that's being done.
Okay, so you have it covered there. Okay,
We do.
okay.
Yep.
And we'll talk a little more in total, but I think that we really looked at being able to have a mesh between $25,000 of contractual wage pieces here that can move.
Okay.
Can you say a little bit more about projected wage ranges for a city manager in 2025?
I think
Make
we,
sure we're competitive and.
yeah,
Yeah,
we
so
we projected at 120 is what we put it in at.
Overall.
Yeah.
last year, a year and a half ago now, when we were looking at our last search, I think that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty confident, recalling back writing up the job description, that we had put a high-end bar. I think we put it between 105 and 135 at that point, looking at a market and the situation that we had at the time. We had a very difficult, timeframe that we're in of trying to get a manager to come and take the job. So there was an extra inflationary piece, I think, thrown there that we thought we might have to expend. When you really look at the size of community in Marine City, population, budget size, and general, the general attraction or allure for a manager, I think that you're safe between 105 and 120 on that wage piece. Again, a lot of the pieces come together, as you're interviewing, they're usually based upon experience and qualifications. So if you're a manager that has good experience and qualifications in similar sized communities, then you're probably going to be towards the higher end, which I think is more of that 120. And then looking again around, we use wage studies from the Michigan Municipal League, even though it's the Conference of Western Wayne, it's in Wayne County, they do a good job putting that stats together. And then by reaching out inherently to our local communities, those numbers are all over the page here. You can get a manager who's, $90,000 to the south of us and one who's 130 to the north or whatever. But for us, looking at the aggregate, I think when you look across the statewide, the broader spectrum, this is a good framework to be in. And it all depends on that candidate that you get, of what their level of expertise and experience is. And sometimes there's trade-offs between I'd rather have this healthcare, I'm willing to give up a little wage to get these different pieces, so.
Yeah.
I hope that
Just,
helps.
That does,
We-
thank
we
you.
are, I'm confident we're in a good area.
Thank
we're in a
you.
good area.
just to give you an idea, when Elaine was here, we hired Elaine, she had no prior city manager experience, and she came in at 65. And then the next one had some, I think she came in at 75. And so we were way down before, so yes, it has been corrected quite a bit.
And that was a lot of discussion from the previous commission and the committee involvement last time, of looking at those wage studies, going, this is where we need to be. And it was admittedly enhanced last time because we were not having the easiest time attracting candidates. Anyway, we weren't having the easiest time.
Thank you for breaking this down.
Yep.
All right, so.
I apologize to the rest of the commission as I asked.
No,
to speak up.
that's what we're here for.
I appreciate you doing it to slow the thing down.
It was all for you.
Thanks.
Give you time to get in the door, Commissioner.
Yep. The next one is the city clerk. And there's been some changes on this increase in wages. We went from having 2.5 staff up, in the office to 3, and we did some where we kind of aligned positions to departments. So one of the positions was kind of more aligned to the clerk, mainly because there's so many elections going on, early voting. You needed that extra body. So this full-time wages allocates Jason and Carol in this. Not their whole wage, they're split as well between other accounts. But
That's another thing before we get too far in there. We get a employee benefit and pay chart. Can you, and that would help you too, because some of these wages are split between multiple funds.
Yeah.
And so we've
we've
I
got,
have some info that'll help you.
all right, because usually we get that every year so that we can see exactly how much, then you know exactly what they got.
The portions out for the different
We knew the
departments.
question was gonna come, we just want to give it at the right time.
Yeah.
That's fine.
and it's not exact. Obviously,
No.
there's contracts that need to be
Yes.
approved, it is
just a
really,
good
but it
estimate.
does help. It shows,
And again, with the exception of the general office staff, who do not have employment contracts, the clerk and the treasurer finance director have employment contracts that are approved by the city commission. So, thank you very much. That are approved by the city commission. So there is a process, even though we will put numbers in a budget, again, the wage pieces are all drawn into the employment contracts, that specifically the clerk and the treasurer finance director will have. I will tell you all, and I think I've probably kind of insinuated this in the past, we did a major reset here in the office too, of realigning job duties and functions for everyone across the board. So looking at the traditional pieces that the treasurer may have done, as the treasurer finance director, there are added pieces and different things in there. We're now in a world of investments that we didn't do before, and that's another piece. As you all know, Jason is the clerk. He's got 2 rounds of 9 days of voting and things. So we also looked at a framework. Again, this is the same thing that Commissioner O'Brien had mentioned. There is a framework of what the pays, the salaries are for clerks and treasurers in communities the size of Marine City. So this gets us within that framework for budget purposes, but any determination of an exact wage will be done through negotiating amendments to contracts. So we just want to make sure that we're within that safe area of what comparable professionals are making in other communities. So I say that's important because sometimes you look at numbers and you go, holy cow. Sometimes there are more than one position in these, and again, that's going to be based on individual, assessments and evaluations and recommendations.
Can you clarify one point for me? On this sheet, what we're seeing like proposed for clerk wages, 77,500. What we're seeing over here in the requested budget on this document for the wages, 85,000. Why is,
yep. So if you look down under general administrative assistant, it says clerk, water, sewer.
I
You
see.
look at that 101,215, a portion of theirs as well goes
Okay.
under there. So there could be more than one position encompassing that number.
I see, thank you.
Yep. Other footnote on here, we did insurance opt-out, insurance, and then there was a reduction in contractual services proposed based on the ordinance supplemental not being needed this year. I guess that's an every other year thing. So it was proposed to reduce it this year.
And we did have those supplements printed last year, which is a good chunk of money, so they're not required in this budget. And Commissioner Hendrick, I think going back last year, you had asked that, why it was 13 from 22 to 23, and we had never had it printed. I think it had been 7 years talking to American Legal. So it's been done, they're in, so that's the reason for the decrease there.
Okay.
There was an increase in conferences and training. It wasn't highlighted in blue or noted. You can speak more on that too, but there are some conferences that weren't, the previous clerks were not attending, but with the early voting and elections and all the new laws and rules, we wanted to include that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not only that, I think I spoke to this too at the previous commission meeting. You look at the previous budgets of, I believe it's $800, 700 of that is eaten up in the Clerks Institute,
Yeah.
that 1 week course. So, I mean, if you do that, you're kind of bound of no more training for the rest of that budget year, which I think there's true value in training and conferences and things to go to invest in the employees and also invest more in the community if we
Well, you're
are properly trained and know what we're doing.
You're doing it too for your certification.
Right, and that's part of it too, but
Which helps the city. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
We should do everything we can, and I appreciate the commission's support in this from day one.
Yeah.
Of making sure that our clerk is a certified municipal clerk, that our treasurer is a certified municipal treasurer. That helps them
Yes.
on their skill set, which helps the staff, which
Yep.
helps the city. And from our insurance providers and our auditor, they love these things because that's good quality training and education. And I will give my pitch again, when you're looking for a manager, we're gonna request at some point that this manager is a member of the Michigan, Municipal Executives Association, that they're active, that potentially they are a member of the International City Managers Association and are working to be a credentialed manager, because that ensures that they're up on their skills and moving forward.
Yep.
And it takes some money to do that, but boy, it returns dividends greatly.
And not just, us as department head staff too. It's important just
Yeah.
to have them go to some of the training as well. So,
Which we're doing again, and hadn't been done for a long time.
Yep.
here.
Yeah.
so.
Well, you've got code enforcement is Jim, and where is the building department in here?
We're a few ways,
Haven't
we're a
gotten
ways.
to
We'll
building yet.
get to that
Are
one.
you-
We just have some code ordinance classification that was under the clerk's office for publications. But when we get there, Commissioner, we have a whole spread
Yeah.
on the building department for you.
Okay.
All right. Next page is external audit.
Sorry, you're talking about for building, that's in this budget
Yes.
binder, but not this.
Yeah, not
back.
this section.
Okay.
Correct.
No, it's in here too.
Oh, it is in here?
Yeah.
Oh, in your individual cut
Yeah.
sheets, yes, there'll be the wage.
Yeah.
I think that's where we were
Yeah,
seeing a
and we'll
discrepancy.
talk to where it ties in
Okay.
on the
Yeah.
specific fund.
Thank you.
Yep. Next page, external audit, you'll see a major reduction. We
Yep.
did make a phone call to Curtis, and I said, our costs have been all over the board the last 3 years. How do do I average it? What are in, he thought this number was correct. So, knowing that we're balanced and reconciled through March and everything's,
Great job.
And he's seriously worked with us the last few years, because he
Yes,
could have
yes.
charged us an awful lot more than
Yes,
what
he
he's
could've.
been charging.
yeah.
For
And he felt
this.
there would be a reduction
Yeah.
this upcoming year.
Which again,
Because
is
of that.
That's a
testament
great
to support for
reduction.
the changes
Absolutely.
inside
Yeah.
the staff.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
Actuarial services, same thing, it was kind of an estimate. I wasn't able to get a hold of them to see, what that cost would be, but it's been pretty consistent. 22, 23, it was higher mainly because I believe something was charged incorrectly to that account that year. Like it should have been charged to the pension fund or the retiree healthcare fund and was not, and
Yeah, whenever we have people retire too, then we have to
Yeah,
do all
yeah.
that, and we had a couple people go, yeah.
yeah.
You may have had a specialized actuarial study that had to be
Yeah.
done in that period of
Correct.
time.
And
we
some
may have had more than one employee that were
accounting,
retiring.
yeah.
I think we had two we had to
Yeah,
do.
so we shouldn't have any of those for a while.
Okay.
We only have a few.
No,
Yep,
nobody can leave.
yep.
I've got a button to close those
It's been
doors.
canceled for you.
The next one, this year, we had some costs for grant administration. This line was added because we didn't have it before. We didn't put any in the requested. I think the idea was we were going to, whoever is doing the grant administration that was just gonna be a part of this, in addition to their salary, instead of the percentage and it being unknown.
Instead of a percentage or a formula to go forward and make an application and hope we get the best, what we're looking at now is, if you're making an application, if we're awarded the application, all grants have a percentage that's administrative fees. That's where we would pay then that portion for grant preparation administration is out of the administrative portion, and that's per grant as it comes forward.
I mean, our proposed engineering firm, right, does a lot more grant writing than our previous one did.
Correct.
So
Correct.
that would come from the same location then, or?
It wouldn't necessarily be on the books here, it would be into part of a proposal for a grant application that, again, when you list the administrative portion, they would spell out, this is, the application.
This is what we spent on
administration
grants.
portion With the grant, so we know when a grant would come before us for acceptance, we'd have that dollar amount right there on the approval piece.
I also think, and I'm, a previous person that did grants for a city, it's important that we do take our cut for administrative costs off the top. They allow that. And I don't know if we've done that much in the past, and not that you have to take the
Yeah.
whole allowable 10% or whatever they allow in the grant, but there are administrative costs involved, and the city should take their portion.
We may not
because
have in the past,
Right.
but we are now
Yeah.
and should.
You should.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
should.
I mean, that's, again,
Because it's
Katie,
administrative work
you're
that
perfect.
we've done.
It's allowable as part of the grant.
And they
We should be doing
usually give certain amounts, knowing that, there is gonna be an administration portion done by somebody at the city. And it doesn't necessarily be the person doing the grant, just administration dollars in general,
Never turn down free money.
Yes. Yeah,
that. You don't, somebody else is taking it.
Exactly.
yeah. And we love the projects, but it's important to take our part
Yeah, yeah.
to administer those costs, because then
Absolutely.
it just allows us to do more grants going forward, so, yep. Any questions on that?
Thanks for including it.
Next is Treasurer's Finance Department. Same thing, there are, my position's in there, and then we have the finance assistant in there as well. The part-time wages, gonna be honest, those are Mary Ellen. We do have some possible staffing changes coming just from life events, and we had talked about, she offered to just do the reconciling of the books every month, and honestly, it's a great check and balance. The auditors love the idea as well. Not saying that will happen forever, but it is a great check and balance. As I'm doing things in here and she's reconciling, she's finding not necessarily an error or, it's a good check and balance. And so those costs are for her, honestly,
And you guys can see, that. I mean,
Small
those
word.
numbers are tracking at a more reasonable number. We're caught up, we've got new systems in place, we're moving forward.
Yeah.
But again, in addition to Mary Ellen, there are some portions in there, because if we have to have some temp or part-time
Yeah.
help, to fill short-term vacancies in the office, something we've never put in, we need
we
to
need
put
to do
in.
that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you feel that's in here even with the amount being so much lower in 24, 25 than it was in 23, 24?
Yeah, so the number of hours needed
Yeah.
to make, that's no
Making
longer
sure-
needed.
Yeah, making sure that you would have the leash for part-time work if needed.
Yeah,
Yeah, we had such an excessive amount that was necessary for us,
right, yeah.
that three times,
It's a big reduction,
almost
that's
three
why I'm
times the
asking.
amount, and we don't anticipate that.
Don't anticipate that at all. I mean, we budgeted, the idea was about 10 hours a month to reconcile. I don't even think it took that this year, or
Yeah.
this month, to do marches.
Well, once everything gets
Yeah,
fixed,
yeah,
we were like 2 years behind at one point
we're not,
in reconciliation,
Yeah, that's what.
yeah.
which should never have happened,
Yeah,
yeah.
and we were, liability
You're right.
Yeah, it
accounts
was-
were having to be reconciled, and remittance accounts were,
Yeah.
so all those are done.
Yay.
Yeah, so we're up to date.
Keeping current
Katie
with
was so
everything
happy
instead
to
of.
take the job knowing that when she walked in the door, she was already 19 months behind.
Yes.
I mean, we're not there
bless you.
A
now,
form of job
which
security.
is great, yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't tell her that immediately, but after she sat at her desk, we did.
Well, it also
Christian
helps
side
us
tag.
because once those are fixed, then we're getting accurate figures now,
Right.
not
Right.
what we've been getting, yes.
Yeah, and guesstimates. And not that this needs to be said during budget time, but Mary Ellen has been such a blessing, like, helping me with this. I would still be months behind, still working on it without her.
Well, she knows
So,
the stuff in her sleep.
Yeah, yeah, so,
Those of you, not to bring up any sore subjects, but those of you that have been on this commission for a while know what the huge overinflated costs are from hiring firms to do this work at their billable hour rate, and you
Yep.
were not getting the level of service like we're getting from a Mary Ellen who's been here, worked through this, so.
Well, she knows this place inside and out, that's the,
and we talked about training, the importance of training, the amount of information I learned from her.
yeah.
Every time I meet with her is just so valuable, so.
You hear her voices at night, don't you?
We all do, yeah.
You're not alone.
Jinx, you owe me a Coke. We all do.
You're not alone, which is a good thing. It's great to
I don't mind
have
them.
someone
It
like Mary
is,
Ellen to be
yeah.
able to do this.
She,
Yeah, and someone for me to, like, to call,
yeah, she knows her stuff.
yeah.
You even recognized her screams before she heard her voice.
In part of developing a future Mary Ellen conference training preparation to develop that skill level, is this a large enough, I mean, the conference and training budget's quite a bit smaller than what we have set aside for the clerk.
It's a forward, ongoing, and continual process, so I mean, it stacks over years to be able to do that. So I think
Yeah.
that on an incremental basis for the yearly pieces that are there, it probably is. But again, I would say is, and I don't mean to kind of jump in on this, but I think that you'll find too, if we find a training, if Katie sees a training program that's out there that is essential that we have, there's nothing that would prevent us, even though we want to be spot on the budget, but if there's a $1,400 training program and it's essential that we do that, then we're going to come back and say, we're going to need to amend the budget
Okay.
to do this. So keep in mind, those things are always there, and as statutory guidelines and regulatory guidelines change,
Yeah.
those things happen. But, you know, it's a good number, it's ongoing, but as these, you know, individual items come up, I would expect you're gonna see a different realm of Katie and Jason not being afraid to come forward and say, this is so important, we really need to do this. And again, keep in mind that the little pieces that we have in fund balance that we haven't dedicated to those things, that is a good legitimate use of reserve funds to make sure that we're basically self-insuring our stability going forward.
I find the professional development to be a good return on the money, and so I'm game for that if
Yeah.
something like that
Yeah,
comes up,
and
most likely anyway.
The clerks, the costs between the two, they're two different entities.
Yeah.
Mine is, they charge much less. We've talked about it. Yeah.
Oddly, yes, the Treasurers
That's why.
Association is fiscally responsible with their training fees, where the Clerks Association is not. Mine is almost double. We've
Yeah,
had these
'cause we looked at the
conversations.
number and we're like.
They're double.
Looked, and
Yeah.
it's just the cost was half, honestly.
Clerks are more certain. They have to pay a lot more to
I don't know about that.
Yep. Everything else is pretty, on par. So,
I have a question.
yes.
The software maintenance agreements seem to have jumped up a little. Is that new software, better software, or
Yes.
just the agreement?
Just the agreement with high tech and,
Yeah, we
You
had
know.
some shortfalls in what was reflected in the budget before that weren't really true numbers, so we tried to true those numbers up. And, you know, on a lot of our programs, we have multiple modules on there that you get there and go, how come we haven't had this updated? Oh, well, we didn't have this service contractor, we didn't have this. So we've ensured that we have all of those pieces that should have been moving forward. And this, this past year, or the current year that we're in for the budget and what we've got coming up, we already know that there are some software changes, but more importantly, there's a lot of security changes, especially when it comes to our financial software, that are going to be required, that we have to do here on the network and on the individual desktops, and changes within the updates of the software itself. So we've kind of accounted for that too.
Okay, so it's just making you up to
have,
date and everything's good?
BSNA, high tech,
Yeah.
all the programs.
Yes, it's
and-
expensive as it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
On
they're,
its own.
passing on costs, just like everybody else. The assessors, equalization department, The main cost on this is the contractual service. This is a contract we have with the county, and we are on, it's in the contract. So that 41,000 covers having an assessor here doing our assessments. It's not a number we can change, so.
And I do
You know.
believe that we are coming close to, I think it was a 5-year
Yeah.
agreement
Okay.
that comes back before this commission for renewal and consideration. I'm sure there's going to be cost increases on that. It's inevitable,
we're-
because their labor costs have gone up as well. But that'll be a decision that we'll have to have discussions on of what our options are. We are pretty much now in par with most of the communities, at least when it comes to assessing. Our neighboring communities have done away with either firms they've had for a while or consultants and have gone to the county. So it is becoming more the realm. And I would hope that because there's power in numbers, that the municipalities in our area that are all using this, that we have collective discussion with the county too, to say, listen, by for the reason that we're all in here together, we're kind of helping keep your costs in check. Consider that for us a little bit too, so.
And this budget, we're half in year 4 into year 5 on that contract, so
Okay.
it will be coming up. Next one is elections. You'll see some increases here, and it's mainly we talked about this. I said 4 elections. It's really 2 elections and 2 early voting terms, so it's not necessarily 4, it's 2 elections, but
also-
early voting is considered kind of its own animal.
component of the election process.
Oh, yeah.
So it's 2 elections. There could be more if, somebody wants an election, but that cost wouldn't be ours. So, it's the stipends, the setup, the city workers, plus the people that come in to do the early voting. Early voting, it has increased costs tremendously. So you'll see that in here. That's the main thing. Do you have anything you want to say on election?
Yeah, and I'd like to point out too, if you look at 805 for the election inspector's compensation, you'll see that doubled. It will be coming to you guys. I know it's a budget reason, but we still need a resolution to approve it, or just approval, I believe, by both the election commission and the city commission. We are 25% behind in election inspector pay compared to other municipalities in the county. I did a survey just throughout the clerks in the county. We were the lowest paid municipality. I don't think that wage has been increased in quite a few years. And with the legislation out there with reimbursement for elections, 2 out of the 3 in this calendar year alone, the state does reimburse up to $15 an hour. So just to give you kind of a heads up, that's what we're looking to increase from $10.50 an hour to $15 for election inspectors, $11.50 an hour to $16 for chairpersons for those elections. It's only fair. That puts us about the middle of the pack throughout the county, but I still think it's a decent enough wage. These inspectors were great. They put in a lot of time. They put in a lot of effort. And this early voting is really driving that too, of where that price kind of goes. If there was no early voting, that number would be considerably less, even with an increase in that hourly rate for them. And we don't want to lose them to other communities either, because they're a valuable part of ours, and we don't want them to go anywhere else. But we are still in need of some, so if you know of anybody or anybody's interested, please fill out that application and get it turned in.
We have good election workers, but let's face it, elections are not as appealing, especially working them, as they were several years ago. It's tough to get people to work the elections, to put up with a lot of extra that's with the elections, and now adding the 9 days of early voting. It's difficult. And I think that, Jason, you've done a good job and your workers of really being committed to this city and doing that. But I don't know where we're gonna be down the road, and I think that, I know your clerks association and others are having a lot of discussion on this, because, we have our own elections, but most of the elections are not our elections, but we have to administer them. And if you have 2, 3, 4 elections a year, I think that that's a problem for us, not just cost, but losing the ability of even election workers, most of which are retired and things, of saying, I can't commit to all of those. I mean, some people are snowbirds and they go away, and others are just like, are you kidding me? This is,
Right.
This is a lot of work. So it's going to be a challenge, I think, going forward.
We did discuss, there's most likely, some reimbursement available for those wage pieces, but because we didn't know the percent or the amount, we didn't include that in the revenue, so, but we're pretty sure that that's gonna continue to happen. But the state reimburses us for early voting.
It was for February and one of the next two. I'm not sure if it's August or November, but it's one of those two that reimbursement is available. So 2 out of the 3 for the calendar year.
Any questions on that? No. Okay. Building and grounds, there isn't a ton of change on this. We did reduce line 930 quite significantly. It's been budgeted at 50,000 every year, and we haven't even come near that for land and building repairs. We've been far under 20, so we decided to budget 20, knowing that if there is a land or building repair that comes in, then we can bring it to you. We can decide if we want to, use some fund balance for that, where we're going to move money from, but to budget an extra 30,000 in something we haven't expensed in 3-4 years seemed, when you're trying to cut a budget by 60,000, seemed not the right thing to do. So we kind of made that the correct number this year.
We wanted to look at what our actual routine and basic
Yes.
maintenance costs are and use that average for the basis of the budget. But we do know that if an unforeseen issue comes up with a building, or unforeseen or significant issue comes up, that's something that we're going to have to go out, we're going to have to get estimates, we may have to bid. We're going to have to bring that back to the full commission, and we're going to have to then make a decision here, which we would do a budget amendment at the same time. Right now, Jeff is scurrying through of trying to complete building assessments of not just public works buildings. I know that I talked with Jim on assessing as part of our capital improvement plan, which you will see some amendments coming on that. We need to get a good look on the buildings and add all the buildings, inside, outside, under, and top. I talked about roofs earlier. We know at the police department, you look at the police department, that roof in that building its life expectancy is dwindling every year. That's a big ticket item. Painting, soffits, EIFS, gutters, those things, but we need to get that evaluation. We're just in this budget now trying to cover the routine things that we expect, and now plan and start the budget for the unexpected or the big ticket items over the course of a couple of years. We have aging facilities, so expect that you're gonna hear more on this through the course of the year as we put the capital piece together, but we just wanted to make sure in the budget that we know the basic amounts of what we're gonna have to cover. We'll have to address unforeseen and long-term through a strategic budgeting process or as an as-needed individual basis.
So the main wages coming out of this budget is the DPW workers, they're full-time and part-time workers. Did an average, kind of look, it's a much lower this year. They charge as they do projects. So if they're working in the cemetery, they will charge in the cemetery. If they're doing a building and ground, they'll charge here. So it is really an estimate. It depends on what they're working on that day, what the goals are for the year.
Streets are
To kind
streets,
of
water sewer is
see,
water sewer.
Where we're charging them to. So, we budgeted based on this current year's activity because the staff is the same, Jeff's here, and these other numbers, I wasn't sure why they were so high, but they might have been doing other projects that made them 14,000, 15,000.
We also, Katie has been very helpful. We also realized that in the past, we had a lot of change in the treasurer and finance department. We may have had items that, although we're still billed within the general fund, the correct main fund would have been in a different account. So we're going forward. It's hard to go back and true those up. They were general fund costs, but they may not have been in the right budget previously.
Okay.
The right budget line item, I should say.
So any other questions on this?
Just a comment, I like your idea on the amendment for the building, land and building repairs. I think that was always seen in the past, at least the way I always understood it, is that sort of should be for capital improvements to some small degree, but it seems like it was never used that way.
Right.
And Ittrich would always be so proud that he, spent like 1/10 of his budget. And I'm like, nah, man, we gotta fix those buildings. But
Right.
anyway, I'm looking forward to seeing the plan, but Yeah.
And that's what we have to have. I mean, I will be very honest with you, as I always have been. We have had a lot of deferred maintenance on buildings.
Yeah.
That is going to cost us more
Yep.
than had we done it
Yes.
3, 4, 5, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And we're just trying to get our hands around it right now.
And
to-
so it's not
to
all
really
being
put-
done at one
Yeah.
time, too.
Well,
You don't
that's-
want to be doing a roof here and at the PD all at the same time.
That's why over at the fire department, we kept the extra money every year.
Right.
We put that in a fund. We've been able to do the roof. We've done the doors. We've done just about everything in that building without any added increases to the budget because we held on to that excess
Right.
cash.
I mean, but that would be another way to do it.
Yes.
If we had held on to this excess cash, we would have quite a kitty right now of stuff to.
Yes.
And we really do, if you look at our fund balance, the general fund, that's where it would go, you
Yeah.
know?
But it would have been easier to earmark
Yeah.
that.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Improvement fund
Yeah.
instead of
Correct,
returning
but
it
it
back
wasn't
to the main.
earmarked.
Right.
Yes.
And you
Yeah.
all know, it
Yeah.
is more difficult to make a request to get money back out of fund balance to take care of these problems than
Right.
just to say, at the end of the year, it looks like we've got $7,000 unspent. Let's restrict that and move it over to the capital improvement restricted fund.
Yes.
That's what we're
Right.
trying to get to, because once it's gone back to the other side, it's hard to cross back to the other side. It's not impossible.
Right.
But that's why his 5-year plans really, they should have been more, I mean, we make the fire department do the same thing. You got to have everything in there. When was the last time you did it? When is it going to be updated? When is it due? Like engines over there, we have to buy another engine. We have to plan 2 years in advance because it takes us 2 years to get one built. So,
And we can get to that point where maybe
Yeah.
we do set so much aside
Yeah.
every year into,
Part of our process, our
as part of the
budgeting
process, but until we know those improvements, it's hard to figure out a number.
We
yeah,
also need to go from a 5 to a 20-year span
Yeah.
on 5-year increments.
Yeah.
There are 5, 10, 15, 20. And those, every year when we review the budget, change accordingly. So building A may have been the priority in year 5, but it's in good shape, and we can probably move that. But building B, it's terrible. It'll never last 20 years. So this is a good working thing for us, too, to be able to really put those things in a larger perspective of the now and the future.
yeah. Good.
So can I jump over to the wage packet? I think since we're on building, maybe it's related. Looking back at the DPW department, there's not a proposed hourly salary increase for the director. Am I reading that correct? It's a.
Yeah, we left it at that. The idea was it probably would be, if he left and another one came in or he stayed, there wouldn't be much of a change.
There's a few factors here at play. I mean, again, we have our current director for the time being. I think we all know it's probably not a long term, but we don't know when that change may happen, and if it happens, is there anybody internally that would step up, or are we looking at the outside? So again, that's one of those that we can get a general framework of what the wage is, but it's going to be based upon the person that fills that position. What's their experience? What's their expertise? And again, it would be that's another contractual position. So the commission would have to look at it and say, okay, our new person is, and they're hired at, and it's 82,000 or whatever the case
Yeah.
is. So we just don't know that yet, but we know where we're at, and we know we're at a good, solid, average wage based on other communities around
On
us.
that.
It strikes me a bit that there isn't an increase related to inflation or cost of living adjustments. And that's one thing that stands out to me.
There normally, I guess, Commissioner, there normally would be for an employee who's on board more than a year, but in this case, he hasn't been here a year.
Sure.
So the wage was built into taking this at this point.
Okay.
I think, yes, in general practice, what we look at and we've done in the others is you have somebody who's here, here's the moving average at least, if this is where it's going to be. And in many cases, it's equal and no less than what our unionized employees get. So if it's 4%, it's 4%. This case, we didn't have that in there because we have an employee who, again, we don't know what the longevity is in the future,
Okay.
and he's been here less than a year, so there's no moving fees. But again, not out of the realm of coming back at some point and saying, we're doing a contract modification. So he currently has a contract that's locked in at a wage. If that changes, we'd be back to talk about
Okay.
it, if it's outside of the frame. Good question, though.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions on that? The next one's attorney corporate counsel. Again, an estimate. I think the cost have been a little bit lower in the past year. Scott's doing a lot in-house that we don't have to send out to the attorney. So we thought that 65,000 would probably cut it, so.
We did do a small modification
Mm-hmm.
because we know there's some charter review work that's going on right now. But again, the committee's doing a lot of the heavy lifting on that, so there's just really framing of language. But also to caution all of you that, again, when we take a look at a contracted professional services, we know that that can change from time to time too. Do we get a proposed increase from the attorney or from other, that can happen. So sometimes we don't know, what to expect on those. So I think this is a good number based upon expectations of the amount of work, not so much at an hourly wage, which has been very lower and consistent.
Yeah.
It could change. It very well could.
Depends on if you have any suits or any other issues that come up.
Right.
Absolutely. And our number, again, I think this is a good number for a good placeholder here. And we can hope that that's around that we stick in.
Yeah. Next is Human Resource Department. You'll notice from the previous years, we did add a few line items here. There were some items, like employment screenings and some contractual costs for drug testing, things like that, that were put into every department instead of in a human resource
You had
department
to dig
itself.
for it
We had to dig
to
for
find
it. So
Yeah.
we pulled them out of each department's budget, put them here. I'm hoping that employment screenings go down because we're not rotating employees. I mean, that's the goal, right?
Absolutely.
To not have employment
Stability
screening.
is a
Yeah.
good thing.
Yeah, there's no wage pieces here. No one's charged human resources at all. And then there are just some costs, property vehicle liability insurance is there, workman's comp insurance is there. And then some supply costs for, files and some of the paperwork we have to do with payroll and things like that. So that's kind of what's here. There is a footnote here, I noticed about unemployment claims.
Yeah.
We don't know on this one yet. We appealed it, the amount in there. It's not due till September, and we're kind of waiting it out, hoping our appeal gets approved.
Yeah, we've not heard on the
So-
appeal, and the appeal has been out for several months, but that is not uncommon with unemployment.
Yeah.
Yep.
If we failed to appeal, we would have defaulted and they would have already issued
Yeah.
it. We did the right thing and we appealed, and, well, you'll get an answer by September.
Yeah, and I think we turned that in like July, and we're
Yeah,
still
I
waiting to
mean,
hear.
over a year to wait for an answer, but we had to put it in a placeholder because there was a determination amount in that.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think we've got a very strong argument of why
Not to
we
pay
shouldn't
it.
be charged
Yeah.
this.
Next one is special projects. This department is kind of like the catch-all for all the little things that don't go anywhere else. So we call it special projects. So they would be things like, if we have any projects Scott's doing on the city manager side, we put, like the hydrant usage here. It could probably go somewhere else, but it would be its own line item and not ideal, and it works here. So, this is kind of like the catch-all.
It's a good clearinghouse account, and one of the questions the Commissioner had asked about, monies put inside for contractual service. You can see we bumped this up a little bit, about $6,000. I mean, we tried to spread those costs out because, there could be a consultant that's working on one of these projects that is undefined.
Right.
This is that undefined bucket.
Yeah. And then we added a couple of new accounts for tree trimming and removal. This was kind of thrown under like DPW, building and grounds before.
Not easy to find again.
Not
in
easy to
multiple
Yes,
places.
yes.
So we kind of wanted to have a community forestry account. It's just moving it from a different place. It hasn't increased or decreased, or it's just moving it to an easier.
So you can see it.
Our activities
Yeah.
have changed and been redefined. I mean, our DPW has stepped up more on tree trimming and clearing, and now with the chipper and those type of things. We expect there'll be some added activities. there'll probably also be some added revenue. I mean, there are certain things that we do for the residents as part of storm cleanups and things like that. And then there are services that we likely would do if somebody had in the future a bundle of brush and materials that can't be picked up with the regular refuse collection, but really doesn't qualify as a city tree. It'd be very common for us to look, and we'll probably talk about this in the future, again, one of those policy pieces. Oh, here's our fee for doing, chipping of X amount of materials and things, so we needed a landing zone for it too.
Yep. And then the transfer outs, this happens every year as well. The cemetery costs, the revenues coming in don't cover the costs to keep up the cemetery, so we always move funds from the general fund. That's an estimate based on the budget. We did crack sealing again. It's less than last year. We didn't even do any this year, and a lot of that's gonna be based on what roads are being done with this other project. It's a lot up in the air, so this would maybe be for those roads not included in that project. But Jeff felt this amount was good.
The other thing too is now that we have an engineer of record coming on board, that we can get this Pazer study. By the way, I think I'd mentioned to you before we were able to get the grant. I don't have the exact dollar amount, but I saw a nice press release today from SEMCOG. So we're one of just a handful of communities to split 900,000. It's a good amount of money. That will help us to identify streets that need just crack sealing maintenance or those type of things. So, we're gonna do everything we can to better define our activities that we're doing and try to pass those off into regular maintenance budgets and our street, local and major street operational budgets, because it's kind of been missing there.
Well, we've got some streets that were paved way back in the early 80s, and they've never been crack sealed. And I used to ask them about that. Well, I'm doing the new streets well, the street isn't too bad. Let's get to it before it gets bad. We have to be. So you're gonna have a better list of all that eventually when we get to
We're gonna have that, and we're even taking it a step farther that we're looking at the bike paths here. We have to do some maintenance.
Oh,
on the
yeah,
bike paths.
they had big.
We have an opportunity,
Cracks.
and we're trying to participate in a multi-jurisdictional grant that would do some resurfacing, and we actually have a section, I'm sure, Lisa, you see it behind us.
Oh, yes.
It's kind of
It's
gone.
bad,
That
yeah.
we could reconstruct as part of this grant with 2 or 3 other neighboring communities. Crack sealing would be part of that for even that grant. So
Yeah.
these are.
Well, one of the things, though, they've done in the past, especially some of those cracks are 1 to 2 inches wide, and you filled them with crack sealing, and it just disappeared. You almost need, there's a rope they stick in there, and they heat it up, and they do that.
Foam application.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Underneath it.
It was just like
It's not
throwing
gonna
it
stick,
out.
You just throw it in the hole with nothing else there.
Yeah, and it didn't help us at all. But this bike path hasn't been paved since it was put in.
Yeah, it needs.
It has
it's
not been-
still in fairly decent shape.
Considering.
But it needs some seal coating, it needs some crack sealing, and
Yeah.
it needs some replacement.
Yep.
And again, I feel that we have a good shape, partnering with a couple other neighboring communities to get a grant to help us do that.
And it's well used.
Yeah.
I did not realize till I started working here how many people use
yeah.
our little section of bike path.
Where do you think we go when we disappear?
All right, the next one is the police department.
Uh-oh.
Is this where it's-
Wake up. Please, everybody switch to your red ink pens.
This is normal in most municipalities. The police department is a big part of the general fund budget. But I think you do a good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, of keeping it intact, so. Wage pieces, or the contractual wage pieces in there already. Same thing you'll see here, longevity. There is an overtime, we increased overtime by 10,000. But in the revenues, there was 10,000 for Stone Garden. That was kind of like an offset on that. I think the plan is to be doing more Stone Garden.
Yes.
Activity, I guess you would call it.
What's
So-
Stone Garden?
Yeah, Stone Garden is
grant.
a grant
Federal
through,
government reimbursement.
they
grant.
reimburse us, so, that's why that's at 10. Same thing, employment screenings are out. Do you have anything you wanna say, Jim?
Yeah, so
You wanna come up?
budgeting for, what's that?
I don't know if you wanted to come up here.
Can I stay right here?
Sure.
I feel much more relaxed. Budgeting for the 6 full-time, 1 being detailed out to the school, half of that salary being paid for by the school district. as my school resource officer. So there'll be 5.5 officers, and then me, and then with some transition as with my office manager, my part-time office manager, she had to step away, family problems, issues going on that she needs to tend to her family over. Ultimately hired a new office manager. She'd be full-time now Monday through Friday. The 3 days a week I thought would work with me being able to cover the Mondays and Fridays when the office manager wasn't in there. I found out that I was really out of the office more than anything, and it was kind of a inconvenience to the citizens, and as a citizen myself of town, it really bothered me. A half an hour here or there, I get that it is what it is, but a whole half a day maybe where I'm not there in the morning because I'm at meetings, etc. So went along with this, and I hired Stacy Paprika. She started, actually today was her first day, so that's all the full-time expenses there. With that being said, I only have 4 full-timers right now, so there are really 2 positions that I'm looking for. I got one in a background phase, which has been done. I'm just waiting for the state to, in essence, flip the switch for me to bring her aboard. And then I'm still looking for one. So the reason we raised some of the part-time wages is because I've got 2 very well-off part-timers that want to be committed to the department, and they're being utilized to fill in for full-timers' time off and stuff. So that's where we're at for staffing purposes.
So essentially, until you get the full-timers, you're having to pay a little more supplementing by excess hours and then working to fill that gap.
Yes. Yeah. And overtime's gonna be up a little bit too. I know I've got a day spot open this weekend. My sergeant, he left for a couple weeks to Texas, so I've got 1 part-timer gonna be working day shift for a week, and 1 part-timer will be working midnights. And then with the days that they can't work, I have to backfill with overtime. So it's a struggle to try to find somebody to work. I mean, Lisa, you know.
We fortunately
we talked about this.
We fortunately have a trade-off that on the part-timers, where you may expend more on the wages to be in these gap-filling positions, we don't have the fringe benefit piece. But that's not the end-all solution to this, and I just want to say another thing too. I'm very thankful, Chief, for your work and working with Katie on these grants. That makes a difference to what we're doing, because we have the ability to cover the wage pieces even in the interim because of the good job that's been done on securing additional grants for radios, for Stone Garden overtime for those pieces. And that's a game changer for us, because we would really be in trouble if it wasn't for being able to offset all those pieces. So.
I'm going to ask a similar question to what I asked earlier on the employment wage packet, separate from the binder. For 2 of our part-time listed, 25 an hour proposed has no increase. Can you say a little bit more about not changing that right now, or not?
Okay, so that was negotiated as part of the current contract.
Okay.
That was raised to 25 an hour July of last
1st,
year.
yeah.
And so that's contractual. They're stuck at
Yeah.
25 now until the next contract.
Thanks.
Yeah.
But they did get an increase.
Yeah, they got an increase
Yeah.
last year.
Do we know when the next contract talk's going to be coming up?
26 is when this current contract.
June 30, June 30 of 20.
Yeah,
We're
they-
gonna do it way before June 30, though.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll start negotiating probably January or February
Yeah.
of 2026.
We just
So
got,
stay ahead of the game.
we just got finished with yours and the DPWs not too long ago,
Yeah.
so.
It doesn't seem
And,
like.
and maybe you could give them a copy of the contract too.
Yeah, so I do have, when I talked about, I
Yeah.
have those
Have you?
books that have the
Yep.
contracts in them.
All right.
So I have mine.
Yeah.
They're fun read. They're fun to read.
Yeah.
I enjoy some.
You're a labor guy.
I can sit down with a contract and have a good time.
You'll like it. And they are, they are very standard, straightforward contracts here.
You poured a drink?
Yep.
Some people's candy, man.
That's right.
Get it.
And then the capital outlay purchases you have in there. Want to talk about those at all? Sorry.
So yeah, if you just want to go kind of down from the top, going down, 25,000 was what was committed to me by Commissioner Van den Bosch. That's just, I have to put that in there, kind of money in, money out. Type of thing. The next one, radar unit. So The last radio units we've actually had purchased was in 2012, I believe. And it's to the point now, some buttons are sticking, we can't get them to turn on. We've had to actually hardwire them to the ignition switches. It's just time for an upgrade. There's newer technology out there that costs about approximately $2,500 per radar unit. So those fees include the 3 new radar units and some installation. The one down below, it's also time that we get some new PBTs. The last ones were actually purchased in 2008. But those are only a couple $100 a piece. So that's not a big offset. I'm trying to actually see here. The laptop of the chief can probably come out.
Yay, yeah.
Scott was nice enough to give me a Microsoft Surface Pro, and that ties into my computer. I actually port them into my desktop, so that will probably suffice for as long as I need it to, so that can probably come out.
Convenient enough to bring with you tonight, too, isn't it?
And that's an ARPA offset.
Yes. And then so the tourniquets are something the guys have been asking for. I went and got quotes on those, just in case there is an event or something, or one of my officers needs ones or something, we should probably have tourniquets. I think we're outdated on that one. Although we do have a stellar fire department that will be Johnny on the spot. Sometimes seconds matter, so it's time that I know I can give you guys some tourniquets. Going below that, the Life Vac. If anybody's ever seen those, it's pretty much used for children. It just cups right over the mouth and you just pull it out. It's like a little vacuum to help choking victims. You can go right to their website and look. It's a phenomenal system. They're cheap, and I want to get one for each of the patrol cars.
They're great.
So, and I think I talked to Chief Langston. I think he's going to invest in some as well. So, anything I can do to help out, to the community. And then the last one is there are 2 computers in the station that are well beyond the max for capacity. There's not a week that goes by that city manager get an email from High Tech saying you're over capacity. We need to portal in and figure out things can we delete. So it's either we invest in 2 brand new computers or some hard drives to put into there. But by the time you put a hard drive in there and then have to pay High Tech to come in for the install, you might as well just pay $1,200 for a new computer. So
It's a long time since I've seen a Commodore 64.
with Windows Vista.
Hey, but those are worth a lot of money.
But I know I just went through that not too long ago with my email account here,
Yeah.
because I've been here so long that they had to start, and I don't take, I might move something to a delete file, but I leave it because of FOIA laws and all the other stuff. But it got so bad, they had to take the stuff out. A lot of it's just junk stuff, and I don't delete anything else. But we have to be careful about, I know I talked to Jason about that. That's something we're going to have to deal with too. All of our accounts, because,
Mine's the same way.
Yeah, we're all in that
Through
spot.
again, More of the discussion on capital purchases and capital improvements to buildings. We're already, even though we just replaced the network last year, we're already now needing to identify when that next network replacement is, when we have the network components for email, because we're so dependent on this and record retention. And that's the problem here with these, computers. We don't have any onboard built-in, memory that we can expand to, so everything has to be dumped to the network. So the holding time, it's almost like, gee, we just did this. Hey, High Tech's on the phone. I know you did it yesterday morning. We have to. The costs are outweighing us through service than being able to maintain these computers. And it's the realization of where
Yeah.
And from what my understanding is that every time High Tech pushes out an update to the server, to the computers, etc., that also takes up more storage space. And there are so many updates that keep coming out that, you need a 500 gig, a 500 gig computer, and right now mine only have 100 apiece. So, I'm very deficient with storage purposes, and it is what it is.
you almost have to get some portable storage. The old Tahoes, are they both gone now? Or one DPW? Your old vehicles?
One old vehicle was given to DPW.
And the other one?
The Tahoe was sold, and we're going to use actually restricted.
Okay.
Those restricted funds to purchase So to
Yeah, no, it's all right.
purchase anything, FEMA gives us a whole list of things we can use that money for.
These are two.
And out of hundreds and hundreds of things you can use, there's only like 3 or 4 that would benefit us, and I'm like, let's just use it for right here.
Okay,
So,
all right.
Yep. Any more questions? Yeah.
Just, this is not just for the police department, but have you considered asking High Tech to install a centralized storage for the entire city?
So we've sat down and talked about some other options. I mean, I will tell you, I think we need to have a very comprehensive system evaluation of what we have, and we need to look at some cloud options in some cases too.
I mean, this is sort of like an internal
Yeah.
cloud. I mean, like I have
think
4
we-
terabytes of,
We've talked
Network
about that.
attached storage
There
in
are
my
some
house.
pieces though that, I think we're looking at our software, where we have certain software components that we can integrate to the cloud because it's built into the new software. That's gonna help. And then what's left is, what's the best solution for us? It isn't necessarily a whole new network configuration. And so this is in that same line. What can we do for extra software? So, and extra hardware components here. So we've had discussion with High Tech. They were in about a month and a half ago and put some things together for us. And we're also going to evaluate, because we have a network here, what do we do with the police department for the network that we have there? Let's try to take a look at both of them at the same time.
right? Like at my company, you have annual file review, because there's only a certain statute of limitations where you're supposed to even keep stuff, actually for the purpose of,
Yep.
thank God it's passed, now they can't sue us. I mean, I hate to say that, but that's the reality of the situation,
And
right?
that's where we are when we're looking at the FOIA laws, so it's a dual role. High Tech needs to do their research and give us some good recommendations. We need to look internally and say, okay, for these things that we have to have, and they're electronic, we have to have them for record retention, can we
Right.
offload those to
Yeah.
extra hardware?
And that's the other thing we're supposed to
Yeah.
do, so that they can give us generally computers with smaller internal drives. Everybody has access to it looks like just it's our drive, but it's one giant communal drive. But we only have, we have access to our section of it, and we are supposed to, that program's done, you archive it and move on, so let's say cases,
Yeah. We're
ordinances.
looking at the same thing here, and even with Jason's integration, we're looking at, okay, if we're starting to scan documents and save documents, can we get those off to some other type of storage or retention? So I think there's a lot of different pieces there of what can we do with expanding hardware that we have internally here, what can we do to offset archived information that we may not need right away to a cloud setting? And, Jason,
Yeah, and
every day he's in there looking at different things too, and again, we brought High Tech into the discussion.
a lot of cloud-based systems that we're looking to go to. And I know from my end here with agendas and minutes, it takes up a lot of room on our server.
Yeah.
So I'm actually looking at some external storage for that right now, up to 5 terabytes. And with some discussions, with Scott of things that we want to do meeting-wise and that, I think it's wise that we do have an external type thing. They're not that expensive. I mean,
And
a
what
couple
can we free up
$100, so.
inside the networks now to get extra space that maybe could go to an external, or what size external do we need? So we're doing a lot of
Right.
those pieces to evaluate where are we now and what can we do and how do we get there?
And even BSNA they now have a cloud system available. Because it takes up a lot of
Right.
space in our.
Yeah, that's probably,
Right, the software program.
Could have,
So,
yeah.
that is something probably in the near future, we're gonna have to decide if we're gonna move to the cloud. A lot of municipalities are for this reason, because it just takes up so much internal space.
And working with High Tech, if we can move, if we have to update certain BSNA programs, and if the cloud is the best way to update that,
We
and that gets us extra space in our network because we're not having to house the programs, that's a win for us too. So it's a lot of moving pieces, and High Tech's been back and forth, giving us different portions, different components, so it'll change tomorrow. There'll be something better
Sure.
tomorrow, so. But we can't wait forever.
Thank you.
We kinda got off
Just
from
as
the
a
police
suggestion.
department,
No, it's a good suggestion. And again,
I mean, I think that these would be good Band-Aids, but we really need a, more comprehensive network.
we're still going to have the operating desktop, so I mean, this thing
Yeah, yeah.
happens no matter what, but the bigger picture, yeah, is network and network stable, and the more we integrate, the more we have to save somewhere on this
Right.
stuff. Where's that
We
electronic?
also need to save it so it doesn't get removed.
Right, where's the electronic stuff going? And that's the thing right now, in working with High Tech in this last round of things, is building in internal controls and redundancy pieces too. So we can't have a mass exodus and a dumping of data never to be found.
Yes.
So, And again, I think we have a very robust system that it cost us a lot of extra money last time for high tech to come back in and go through and retrieve things that were archived. They were there, so, which was,
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you know, we're at the mercy of, you know, retention policy by the state. I mean, all payroll files, all that, you have to keep them forever. So as time goes on, you just get bigger and bigger and
getting
Same
bigger.
with the
a bunch of
building
electronic
department.
files off
Yeah.
of paper copies that we can properly electronically archive is going to be a big help for us.
And samely with the building, right? Building department, that has to be
Building
forever.
plans, I mean, at some point, we have to, again, build our plan and our strategy of getting those documents from paper,
To electronic.
scanned, converted, electronic files, and then stored and retained somewhere because they're forever files.
From an archival aspect, cloud storage is problematic in a lot of ways, though, especially because you're reliant on an outside company to retain that material that you're legally obligated, and in many cases would just help us if we could reference. We've talked
Right.
about that with various pieces that we've looked at over the past several months. Having background information helps. An outside company storing that, there's a reliability issue that comes up, and a
Right.
accessibility and preservation.
It's a delicate dance, and when we look at especially files that we are required to keep forever,
Yeah.
I mean, all of us are sitting here today in 2024 going, what type of electronic media is this going to be stored on that can be accessed 60
Yeah.
years from now? I mean, we're not concerned about it today as we're sitting here, but
Right.
somebody will want to look at that information 60 years from now. That's a difficult solution, because some of those solutions aren't even here today.
Like floppy
So-
disk.
Yeah.
Well,
Hey,
yeah,
nobody
but
has to read this, you know?
those held kilobytes of data. I have a flash drive that's 2.5 times the size of Jim's whole hard drive,
Yeah.
right? So that was,
It's
a
amazing.
few bucks. It was like $30 or something, so.
You know, today, I mean, I'm using a
little thumb drive,
today that's smaller than the
256 gig.
telephone.
But in 10 years, is there gonna be a
Right.
device to put that into? That's the scary
Sure,
part with
yeah.
not having, as much as we don't love paper, at least paper, you can put it in a box and go find it.
Correct.
If you don't, stop.
But that's
But
part
that's
of the.
scary, like, in 10 years, is there gonna be something to put those in to collect the data?
But if you have the hard drive that the data is on, you can
Right.
still figure out the
Right.
technology to access it. If it's on a
Right.
cloud storage somewhere and a company goes under or something
Yep.
like that,
Right.
there's
Right.
accessibility
Scary.
issues.
And that's the issue that's a real issue for us, because a lot of these new programs are only cloud-based programs. You know, proprietary software for government, it's only coming on cloud-based. And that is gonna be a problem for all of us. I mean, we're not into having that difficulty with it now, but I think Jason and I are both seeing, as we're looking at technology and upgrades to software and certain programs, and even the talk with BSNA, I imagine at some point a group like BSNA is going to say,
You
hey,
have
we're
to.
only cloud-based.
Yeah.
And then we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place.
But they should also offer some sort of redundancy guarantee too, right?
They should, yeah.
Right.
But what I've noticed most smaller companies or what have you are doing are they have their own storage, IT-wise, and then they utilize like a Carbonite or a cloud-based backup. This is not designed to be like
Yeah, it's not just forever
access
storage, it's
daily.
backup, yeah.
Yeah, right. This is, once monthly, or maybe a daily, they've got you install a program on your computer, and anything that changed, it just quick uploads. So,
We're also, and again, this is a lot more discussion with high tech, but we're looking at, hey, when we go and replace the network server the next time, do we have a salvageability of portion of that server, of that hard drive space that can become an archival unit to this? And, we know they do that in different places. You know that that's not your primary, but you still have some files there, and you still have some space that can be repurposed for extra storage and archival space. We want to look at that too, as an option. We already have it, we already own it. What can we do to make it work too? So,
And just to kind of give you guys an educational issue at the PD, most of the things that we utilize, I would say maybe 85%, our report management system, which is Clemis, and then our GTAC software, all that's cloud-based. So everything that's stored on these two computers are just miscellaneous stuff that I don't even know half the stuff. I mean, the one time they wanted a portal in and look, I was watching them do it, they were deleting users from 08 and 09. So there is so much stuff in the background that we don't even see, so, and then you had all these upgrades to the system, software and stuff, that just, it skills it all, so.
But this ties back to that that
Yeah,
long-term worry that we have going, these programs are only cloud-based, and they maybe have some type of backup or redundancy, but for how long? Does that then migrate? So these are the things, the questions that we have to ask as new software comes on and new programs. What guarantees do we have? I mean, how does this work? It's just, it's interesting and becoming more interesting every day.
So the police department, anything else?
Sorry to pull us away from
Yeah.
scrutinizing.
It wasn't scrutiny, it's
Any-
opportunity
yes.
for other improvements.
We call that a smoke screen.
Yeah,
A learning moment, I call it.
yeah.
Any questions though, in your expenses, anything stands out, you have any questions on?
Glad to see the Vista will be upgraded.
Good. All right, the next line is the fire department.
Oh.
We got this number from Chief Slangster. He said 270, and then you had mentioned it maybe a little more, so we throw 275 in there as a placeholder to pay
Yeah.
We'll come
the
back
fire
and show
authority.
this up as an actual number once that budget has been adopted by the fire
Yep.
authority.
Yep.
And I think that's what we've done in the past.
Yeah, and I think we had talked about that at our last meeting and kind of unofficially reviewed it, and nobody really seen anything that stood out to them, and I've had it now for a couple weeks, so we plan on getting it out for public view and then adoption by next month. But and it went up a little bit because the 3-year average went up just slightly from Marine City. We did put in for wage increase. I think officers' wages hadn't gone up in like 10 years and stipend, and we are still trying to get some more paid-on-call members. And then turnout gear.
Yeah.
Turnout gear has a 10-year expiration shelf life, no matter how much it was used or not. We had, I believe years ago, we got a big lot of gear through a grant, and now that 10 years is expiring on a lot of stuff. And we put another grant. We just don't know if we're going to get it or not, so we had a plan in the budget for just in case we didn't get it. So that's why through all of those things, that's why it kind of went up, and then
Yeah,
general
we're trying to
professional
keep it at
things.
a minimum, but I'll tell you, eventually, all the fire departments trying to get people, everybody's going to have to spend more to try to get full-time people.
This
It's inevitable.
is a piece that I think, and we were talking
We
about
talked
earlier
about it,
today.
yeah.
As much as we work very hard to cover this cost out of our general fund, our taxes and transferring in, at some point, the dynamics of fire services are changing. That, again, we have a great fire authority. And most of our communities, within the county now are members of some type of fire authority or considering it, but that's still yet not enough. And so there's likely to be a migration where you're going to have supplemental full-time services. And funding changes, and as you guys all know, we've been very fortunate. When you start to add in full-time, then you add in the increased cost of benefits and fringes. And whether that discussion ends up being from one authority to a larger authority or multiple pieces or however it's put together, we don't yet know. But we know there's going to have to be a financial solution to that at some point because, as I started early on in our discussion, when we are maxed at our millage cap, and when we're subject to fluctuations on a Headley proposal, at some point, when those costs increase, which they will to provide that service, how do we continue to pay those costs without having to affect, there's a cause and effect, then we have to cut other portions of our general operating. So really, a whole lot of discussion is going to take place, across the entire county of how do you face the difficulties of providing fire and EMS services. And when I say EMS, I don't mean the ambulance side, I mean first responders. It's ask any chief and they'll tell you, hey, it's tough out there. And I know I was in that business for 22 years myself.
Yeah.
It's not easy, and it's going to be more difficult, and we're going to have a lot of discussion collectively of how we serve the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years and beyond. So-
But the fire authority has saved the city a lot of money too, because in the past, the city paid the bulk of all the
We have
costs.
shared costs now.
With the townships, we were paying almost all of it. This was almost like double, but when we went to the call cost, they all started picking up their fair share, which made it a big impact for us.
It was survival
Yeah.
here, St. Clair, the
Yep.
same. And now I think that you're to that next step of how each of these authorities and communities get to the next level. So it's a watch and see.
And it's Cotterville, that's obvious.
Cotterville, China, East China.
China, East China, that's it?
China and East China are half. We do half, and then there's half in the St. Clair Fire Authority, those two
Oh,
communities.
interesting.
They're half and half.
So the north end or something.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that-
Yeah.
Yeah, it does make sense, actually.
Yeah, so they're in two authorities. We're more, we're cheaper down here. We really, they do a good job down here really watching the money, especially when it comes to buying equipment. And that, you know, some of these, I saw Port Huron just went out and bought an engine, 600-some thousand. We buy them for like 300. We try to find whatever's cheapest, if it's in the route, that's what we get. And the guys are always happy to get what we have, but we're very mindful of that cost.
And Lisa, you know from setting and both of
Yeah.
your involvement there, that's becoming difficult to keep in check on the cost of these
Yes.
now, because when you're in the industry, and the industry is saying, hey, if they're paying $500,000 to $600,000, yeah, we've been selling this for $300,000, but now we can get $450,000, we can get $475,000. And we've seen this market change, that equipment has been so inflated on cost from the manufacturers, and the timeframes. Before, you're waiting, you know, originally at one time it was 6 to 9 months, then it was a year. Now we're like 2 years.
2 years.
And looking at the costs that are easily approaching $500,000 for just an engine, a fire.
Well, and you have to look at too, they have to be replaced, the requirement by the state, they have to be replaced every so many years. And so we did one engine now, by the time we get that one paid off, we will be ready to do the next one. But we've even resold some of the tankers, 2 tankers, we've sold them to other small communities that they're so desperate for stuff. They come and we sell them whatever we can at a good price for one of them was that one tanker. I mean, it was slower and crap, and
Like
those
West
people.
Wisconsin, didn't it?
Yeah, they drove it through the UP.
Oh, awesome.
We don't know how many days it took them to get that poor thing there, but they were so happy to get the truck because, you know, we could sell it at a discount, but they needed it.
Yeah.
They needed the equipment.
It's amazing, and I know, again, you're talking St. Clair, they sold a truck that was, you know, coming up, 38-year-old
Yeah.
truck to an out-of-state community that's like our new 38-year-old
Yes.
truck. Because it's something they could afford, and it worked, it was great. So-
Yes.
And we still they got revenue, you guys got revenue in the last one?
Yep.
But it's that replacement piece that's just, the industry is just.
It's tough.
continuing to decline.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Inspections and code enforcement.
Bill's favorite department.
Yep. So this is the building department and then code enforcement light. The full-time wages, we moved some of those costs over here because there is staff now helping with distributing letters, the enforcement letters, trying to streamline the process a little bit.
Streamline and improve.
With code enforcement
the process.
and, you know, being able to issue permits all week long, not just when the building officials here, the little one, the electrical, you know, plumbing, mechanical, things like that. So that's where those full-time wages come from. Part-time wages is the code enforcement officer, and then the bulk of the cost is in contractual services, which is your building official.
Now, does that include our permit fees?
So this, in a portion of this is, the way the contract is written does include a wage and a permit fee
Yeah.
portion. Now, again, those fluctuate every year based on the volume, but this is something that we do need to have a discussion and evaluation on.
Seriously?
I think as Katie just said, we supplemented in some costs in this budget from our city staff, because again,
Yep.
we have an obligation to make sure that when somebody comes to the city, if the building official isn't here, and they still want to pick up a permit and pay for a permit, we need to conduct the business for our residents. So we've changed it. Code enforcement, which again is connected at the hip, but yet a separate function. As I told you, I think several months ago, we were planning on a big change this spring, and we have. I mean, we've got over 31 active enforcements. That's a lot for us, I mean, right now on the books. Because we made that choice to go forward and to attack this head on, but also change and approach our willingness to work with people saying, hey, here's the violation, but if you make complaints, you do this. But when we get to that point now, and you guys have probably seen from the minutes, when we have people who aren't working along with us, when they have a building or property that continues to deteriorate, we're pivoting those now to a dangerous, building commission. And there are going to be more of these coming to the city commission that we need to get some legal pieces. So I still think that we're going to have a lot of discussion through the course of the year of how this functions, how the contractual agreement is in place, how we're looking at fee schedules of what portion returns to the city, what goes to the contractor, and even looking, we will need to likely add a line item in here for some legal services. There are just some cases that we are only gonna get compliance by having our attorney take those forward, and we haven't had that. So this is a good budget for what we have as operating in today. I guess what I'm saying is that doesn't mean we're operating like this tomorrow. We have to have a lot of tabletop workshop discussion of, is there a better way to provide the service and to do this? And is there a framework that needs to be changed contractually from what we have today to how we need to be tomorrow? So I've heard that from many of you, we need to evaluate this and look at this, and I think we do.
Is that part, so contractual services, is that part Tracy and part Bob, or that's 100%
That's
Tracy?
That's Tracy, that is not a
I will
reflection.
Because, yeah,
tell
going
you-
from 55 grand, that's 50% increase.
Well, and it depends on permit fees. I mean, he gets a percentage of the
Sure.
permits, so,
Which is something we need to look at, because pretty much most other communities do not do that.
We still have to operate as a city, essential functions of planning, building, zoning, and code enforcement that may not currently be getting covered by those fees going in. The majority of that is going to the contractor as a contractual service. We have to evaluate it. We have to look at it because we still have to cover our portions of necessary activities in the city.
Because we used
And
to,
that doesn't mean necessarily a permit increase or those type of things. It may mean looking at the allocation and how.
well,
it's
we used to use all of it for the person, and then we used to have a full-time person here, and that's what we really need to start looking at, because I hear a lot from the people about when they need their inspections done, and they can't get them done quick enough when they're waiting on a cement truck or they're waiting on a delivery. We got to be more proactive with this, but all our fees are going to the one person when we could be using those fees to get a full-time person.
Right.
or maybe a cost share with another municipality.
Something,
Yeah.
But that's sort of what we're doing now, right? I mean, doesn't he definitely works
Well-
for East China also?
No, I think we have,
They're
We're not doing
independent.
cost
Gets
sharing.
paid.
They pay a separate contract, we pay a separate contract.
Right.
So again, I think coming together saying, hey, is there a better way for our communities to come together and say, we may employ the same group and the same person, but can we do this collectively so we each get a financial benefit too and have standardization? Right now, it's like he's got 3 different jobs. It's-
Yeah.
It is, and I don't think they're paying the fees.
and I have some
And Bill can tell
discussion
you.
up in, with the code enforcement, the building officials of Michigan, and then I got a lot of classes, and I kind of threw this at them, and they just shook their head and said, what? You're paying them both? I'm a building inspector, building plan reviewer and everything. I have a salary, and they hire me as a salary. When we hired other 3 people before Tracy, they were salary,
Yeah.
and they worked all day long.
Wilbur, I thought was.
We
only
have a
few days
problem
week.
with,
No, she was
I get
full-time.
complaints that
She was
he's
code
not
and
there.
building.
I know that Lisa had a problem with his house, with her roof, and I went and looked at it.
Yeah.
And we went through and through and through, and Tracy never did anything about it, to look at it. But when we hired him, prior to the city manager before this, when we hired him, he was an individual, full-time. Okay, and then somewhere along the line, it never came to the commission. They hired him, he formed a corporation. And did,
Yeah.
and then when you go to a corporation just like our engineers, we have to give everybody a chance. You just can't go from full-time and then form a company and
The corporation thing,
let's not look at it, you know?
if I recall, was just for the document scanning thing that he wanted to do. I
No,
thought that
No.
was.
no, his contract changed.
When I
Went
talked to
from an
him about
individual
up
to a
in Lansing,
corporation.
my
We never
guy,
saw the contract. It was approved without our,
This is one of those
Knowledge.
items, as I kind of gave the teaser at the beginning, that I think merits
A further discussion,
an approval of a
Yeah.
budget to go
Yes.
forward, but more discussion of
Yeah.
policy implementation and, policy procedure and operational, because
Yeah.
there are a lot of questions. One piece that's missing in this too is keep in mind, and we have to look at individual, contracts here. We have planning and zoning services that need to be conducted too. We have a building official, but a building official is not necessarily a planning and zoning administrator. Those are the things that we have to look at. Now, whether that's, we have McKenna or Wade Trim or things like that, we have some missing pieces here too, that, we have to really take the 500-foot view and then right down to ground level on what changes and modifications do we need to make in the operations. And it is that restructuring contracts, is that contractual versus our own employee, is that sharing with other communities, how do we integrate planning, zoning in? There's a lot of talk, but it's important that we have to do that in the course of this year. But our time-wise, to get a budget done, doesn't allow us to do that, but we can't lose sight of it.
Yeah. And my own thing is just, if we paid almost 90, and a bunch of that was in fees that we could have collected, why don't we pay them somebody 110 and then collect the fees? And we'd be winning overall, right?
Right, well, that's what we have to look at.
Yeah,
Right.
and this is why I think that we need to be able to have all of that information for that discussion laid out in front and saying, okay, here's what we garnered in permits and costs, and here's what we paid for inspection. So here's the building inspector, here's the mechanical inspector, all across the table, so everybody can look at it and say, okay, is this really the best way for us to go? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. What are the options? And so, I mean, that's, I guess, our take to you is, we feel that that discussion has to happen, because this may not be what's best for Marine City. Or we may find out at the end of the day that, okay, maybe this is. But right now, when you look at the numbers and we start to put it together, that piece, Commissioner, as you said, again, are we just handing everything out, and we're not even covering our own expenses?
Correct.
That may be the case.
This isn't 100% Tracy, right? Because I had an electrical inspection
Correct.
done.
Right,
and
so you-
Yeah,
that was contracted out to
Yeah.
somebody
Right.
else.
You have the ancillary inspector pieces that go in there too, for
Okay,
mechanical.
okay,
plumbing,
okay,
for-
okay. But
We
They're
have
just minimal.
three guys.
Yeah, they're.
But we also need to look at these, this is where we also need to look at the business licenses. This is in the fee schedule. That was another thing we said we wanted to talk about, and look at these business licenses because they were so high. And how to fix the issue with,
Might see some answers on that one in this thing too, to
Okay.
make some adjustments. But again, there's more to it, and we have other pieces that we need to put in. I mean, we're talking about, or we'll continue to pick up the dialogue on vacant buildings, and we're gonna talk about the restructure of the business license, and are we missing something with other registration fees? And we have to do that. We have to do that with this piece, because
Yes.
it's difficult for us here to get the lay of the land, and we're also inside here looking at it going, wait a minute, but we still have services that we as a city have to perform that aren't contractors, and I'm not sure we're covering that cost. The answer isn't necessarily raising, again, the permit cost, it
No.
may be a restructure piece,
yeah, because they're what, 2 days a week?
today's week,
How many hours a week each?
10,
10?
15?
And it's hard, you don't
I mean,
know,
we
you don't always know
because
when he's out in the field.
too.
Exactly. So that's the other issue, yeah.
Yeah, well,
We need to seriously look at this.
I was on a job in China Township, and I probably shouldn't say that. And it was over a lawsuit, and it was in my township. And I went there, and the person that was representing them on the collapse of the basement was Tracy. And he was supposed to be working for us, yet he was out there. You know, I don't have, and in Marysville, I've talked to the Marysville, and he says that he thought it was a shock to get, well, one or the other. You either get a salary or you get by the permit. That's what our electricians and stuff, they're getting by the permit. They're not getting by salaries. They're getting by the permit. To me, it's double dipping, but that's,
I think a lot has to go back, I mean, I wasn't here when the arrangement was put in place.
yeah,
But
but it was never brought to
everything else, I
here.
think It's worthy of us
Further discussion.
drilling down aside from a budget workshop, which isn't really the best place.
Yeah.
Or isn't the place that's put it to talk about. We need to have a separate workshop piece. But they're good, valid questions. I just think there are a lot of pieces to it that are going to merit much more
Okay.
work,
Right.
or as we say in this business. Next item on the list.
DPW.
Yep, this was general maintenance in the past. Scott asked that we change the name of it to Department of Public Works, because it kind of
It is.
That's what it is.
All encompassing.
Yeah, so these are, DPW wages and all their contractual items, supplies, contractual services, we reduced a little bit. The contractual piece we have for some monthly reports is going to be going, because F&B's already
On next month, the
Yeah.
1st.
doing that.
It is included in our contract, our operations contract with F&B.
So,
So it shouldn't, it is ending.
okay, yeah. And then like an expense, the dump truck, again, that's just capital funds being moved over that we've been putting away for a few years to pay for that dump truck, there. And that's,
The wage piece again reflects anything contractually to the teacher's contract at 4%.
yeah.
You don't need employment screening for any of your summer help? Or don't you do?
That would be under
We're-
human
That's
resources.
where we
Okay,
move that to
got
human
it,
resources
got it,
now.
okay.
Yep.
And you moved the police there too, right?
Yes.
You moved all that over
Yeah,
there.
we, each department.
It's easier for us to track it.
All right,
Into
got it.
one, okay.
I guess either way, you could say, well, we want to track who we paid for,
Yeah,
what department, or, it's a cost of doing business. You have to hire people, you have to do.
If
Those
we
sort
had,
of things, new
50
employees.
employees, and we had, 10
Yeah.
in the DPW, so it might make sense to keep it in that line item, but,
Okay.
when we have only a handful of employees, it's easier for us to track it on HR.
And understanding most of those fees come out of, from the police department. And fortunate that we utilize a company to do these backgrounds. At $950, I've actually washed 3 people out of the hiring process because of what they found in the background. So not to digress on
Yeah.
another topic, but well worth it.
okay.
When you're saying screening, is this just background checks or drug screening?
All of it,
All
All
of
of
them.
Yeah,
yeah,
Pre-employment physicals.
pre-employment,
Yeah.
yeah. Yep. The next is street lighting. We have 2 additional street lights in the city now. This is just a ballpark.
yeah. DTE's asking for another increase?
Yeah.
Well, DTE, I mean, we're at the whim of DTE, it's their system, we pay the bill. We all did a big move to push to go to LED a few years ago because it was a much more cost-efficient,
Right.
effective way. And then, DTE realized the rates were too low and raised their rates for LED.
Right,
But keep in mind, our 2 lights that we added this past year, I believe, I don't.
they're by
have
the
exact
school
numbers.
ward.
Yeah, I believe they were just a little over $1,000 for the fixtures themselves, and the monthly billing increase was,
Minimal.
$20, $14 or $20. So it wasn't a big increase to add those in, it was a safety
Yeah.
piece. But when you take all of our lights together throughout the city that are on the DTE network, the DTE rates for streetlights have continually gone up.
Yep,
And we have other options.
I mean, they did go way down, 23, 24.
Yeah.
We amended the budget up to 93 and we only used 68. That's wonderful. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
huge savings.
And I think,
and it could be, an accounting change as well.
it could be, but also there was
Still had
a
a quarter of
significant
the year to
increase
go,
from
though.
the Michigan Public Service Commission that approved the whole lighting increase from DTE. So
Yeah,
that's probably the catch-up in part of
Yeah.
this too.
Actually, 3/4 of the year.
yeah, 3/4.
It's only, it's only through,
Yeah, it's only through March 31st.
Yeah.
yeah, I just noticed that, sorry.
We're gonna be close,
We're gonna
within
be
a couple
close,
$1,000, we think.
The next is the rubbish collection disposal. This, amount is contractual with, Emterra, so,
Have they been trying to raise rates like they were trying to do to everybody else?
So Emterra did not do the same maneuver that they did to many of our neighbors. We didn't have any contact from them. They didn't sit down and say, we want to increase this, which they did with the neighbors and said, here's an extra cost. No, what we got is we got a bill, or probably now 5 months ago or so.
no, every time they bill.
No, but I mean, it started about 5 months ago, I
Yeah.
think, where we had this new cost of almost $400 on there as a small surcharge, a pandemic,
Post-COVID, yeah.
post-pandemic surcharge, and we've never paid it. And we refused to pay it because we've been waiting for justification. It is not in their contract.
Yep.
And we don't know how they
Yeah,
were
we're
able
not-
to just put an item on a bill and expect us to pay it. So we keep getting late notices, and we keep paying the same basic amount minus the post-pandemic fee. We've even sent correspondence to them saying, please explain to us why you have this on here, but we're not paying it.
I've left
Okay.
messages, emails,
Yeah.
Nobody
You're
is
just hoping you'll pay it, yeah.
calling us
Yeah,
back.
and we're not.
You know,
Again, $400 or less a month, but still, when you add it up over the course of the year,
Yeah.
and the principle is, it's not
Not on
in
the
the contract, how can you put a fee on here? So, yes, we had a fee show up, but not the same type of maneuvers that were going on in neighboring communities.
So I watched one of those meetings, and their arguments for it were that nobody's back at work, and we, as a, it used to be people would go to work, distribute refuse at work, and then the work contracts would do that, and then people, now that everybody's working from home, the amount of garbage is increased at home. I mean, you could argue it sounds ridiculous, but it's at least somewhat plausible, right? But Ford anyway, GM, Chrysler, all of us, we're all back at work now. So that excuse should be gone.
And I don't think it's a very solid excuse. I think
Nope.
at the time when they placed this on, like I said, 5 or 6 months ago, we were past it. Maybe in the heart of the
Yeah.
pandemic in 20 and 21, and even maybe into 22, before a lot of people were back to work, I could see that. But to place it, 3 years after, all of a sudden it's showing up, I couldn't understand it. And the other thing too is with the cost of inflation of groceries, people might be eating less now too, I don't know. But that's an easy answer for us, if they would sit down and say, this is why
Right.
we're doing it. What's your tonnage?
Yeah.
What's your dumping fees? What's your tickets showing? What's your tonnage increase? I mean, there's ways to verify that. We've got no answer.
I know me personally, I even saving my cottage cheese containers like my grandma did, because I ain't buying plastic anymore.
Yeah.
He's laughing because it's
Yeah.
true.
It's a Polish thing.
It's okay, Grandma Katie. You're being a good steward of
Yeah.
our environment.
Yep.
I appreciate it.
The next one is the Watershed Council. These have just, kind of carried them through.
Yeah.
Some basic increases, and that's it. The next one, safety program for employees. These are contractual pieces that we have to have certain safety equipment for the DPW workers, so that's here.
We have to have a safety
Safety
program for
program for
insurance.
insurance,
It doesn't
yeah.
really change.
Okay, it's insurance.
Yeah, it's just something, we don't have many charges there, but kept the 2,300 just as a placeholder, we may not spend it. Next one is planning. Scott touched on this a little bit with the, building and code enforcement. This is where we put some increase for a possible planning zoning consultant. It's less than projected for this year because the master plan's being paid for out of that. That will go away because that's only every 4 years or so.
And that's a reimbursable, that's a reimbursable
Yeah.
cost, that $20,000 we were able to get an MEDC grant. So when the master plan is done, we're gonna submit our invoice for
It'll
our
be reimbursed.
$20,000 coming back. But we did want to keep that moving forward, so that was the other part of the placeholder. You guys had asked about additional work that might be done. A lot of it falls under community economic development.
Planning and
redevelopment ready,
zoning, yeah.
Planning, zoning,
Yeah,
that's
that's
where we
here.
landed it.
Yeah. Kept CED, the same. Publishing went up a little bit just because any publishing costs are going up in general. So, next one is zoning, same thing, publishing, just increased it. The cost to publish in papers, the newspaper is becoming,
It's ridiculous.
excessive, and, the state and the planning and zoning, they require you to do it, but I don't even know who reads the newspaper much anymore, but it's required.
It's
So,
crazy that it's an
we have
antiquated
to.
requirement that says must be printed in a newspaper of
Newspaper.
general circulation. There is no such thing anymore of general circulation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most people are looking at it online, but we have to do the print, we have to have the
Yeah.
affidavit of publication.
Yeah.
We will be looking, and again, you can expect through the course of things that, we'll approve the fee schedule, we're probably gonna have adjustments to the fee schedule, because as we finish the master plan, and when we go to rewriting of the zoning ordinance, which comes later in the fall, through the process, I think you're going to see recommendations for changing our fee structure for site plan reviews, for those type of things, which will largely incorporate making sure we have revenue coming in. If somebody's presenting a development to us and we have to put a publication in, as part of that whole application and
Review
site plan
cost.
process, we're gonna cover our cost in that. And we have been doing that, but we wanna make those adjustments, so I think you'll see some other changes as we continue on.
Yeah. Next one is recreation park facilities. Again, the wage pieces are mainly the DPW workers who are maintaining the parks, cutting the grass, things like that. And then there were some normal, we have money sitting in the restricted fund and have been, for park improvements. So this year we thought, since we were in a deficit prior to using some of these funds, that if we did need more sand or repairs to the bathroom
All
or
right, sign, the sign.
the sign.
Signs
we-
are included.
Denny Daniels, poor guy who takes care of our Memorial Park down there, has been begging for a sign. He even was willing to pay for it on his own, and I told him we would
This is part of
look at it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so we
Those
can
improvements to the
use,
signs, replacement of ropes that are within our,
Yeah.
our nautical mile area.
He just wanted
All
one
those
for
things.
Memorial Park,
Yeah.
because, I mean, he does a beautiful job with it. And he was willing to give us his own money. I said, no, we will look at it,
so
so.
we didn't list those.
Yes.
It'll kind of be, when the weather breaks more, when they go and see what lasted the winter, what didn't, how much
Yeah.
sand we're gonna need, where's the water level gonna be,
Right.
all those mulch, those sort of things, what parks need mulch.
Yeah, it'd be nice to get this one, I know this is next year's budget, but it'd be nice if we could get it done before Memorial Day.
We think we still have a number of small, little items that we can get done within what we
Yeah.
budgeted this year.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, because,
Ropes, buoys, signs, some signs painted, and then an
Yeah.
incremental program of really having replaced the majority of our signs. They're weathered, worn, and well past their life expectancy.
and they're all different. It'd be nice to have all those park
Standardization.
signs
Yeah.
the same, yeah.
Those
Okay.
restricted funds, just so you know, come from the county rec village. We get a portion, and we have to use it towards those things. We can't use it towards wages or fringe benefits, or any of the other expenses. It has to be used towards specific, park-specific items, so. That's what that's for. Any questions on it? The next is the library. I mean, we're pretty fortunate, we own the building, but they kind of take care of it. The county does with the library. We do have the contractual services is the cleaning portion of the library, and the electric and the gas. The good news is this budget is 17.1, and we get like almost 15, we get most of it back from the county as a reimbursable. They pay us for the utilities and any of those expenses, so we get those monthly.
Quick question on this one. I was asked if we had a budget item for building repairs for the library, if I knew anything about this before this came out. My understanding is the Maine County system is interested in contributing financially to repairs. I directed them to contact you all. Is that part of this conversation? I noticed we do have a building repair line item now.
Yeah, we keep it minimal, yeah, but if
they're
they want to
interested in doing
contact.
more, I mean,
yeah.
right now, we just have our agreement with the county library system that does a reimbursement back to us.
Okay.
And we have to put together, a small budgetary questionnaire every year, but if they're looking at increasing that, or if they have specific items.
For a project.
I mean, I know in my past experience, at least in St. Clair, very limited to what we can get from the county system, because again, they own the building, we own the building, but hey, if things have changed and they want certain things done, and we can get a working relationship to do it, we're
Yeah.
willing to talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know the library's complaining about the cleaning people.
We understand.
We have an internal concern, and I have met with the contractor, and we've seen a small improvement,
we
but we're
understand.
not where we're
Yeah.
at. But we also have a problem of a risk right now. It's not the biggest item that we need to bid out here.
Right.
Moving forward, and quite frankly, the cost of cleaning services, I mean, I'd rather take the carrot versus the stick approach to say, can we do a better job, can we do these things, because the cost for cleaning services, if we have to contract out, is astronomical. So I'm hoping that, and I think we have seen some improvement from our little friendly discussion.
And luckily, we're, capable. So.
Who asked you
we
about
pick
the
up after ourselves pretty well.
I was contacted by the head librarian, who was contacted by an official from county. from
Okay.
the- From within the
So from the
system.
county, it was the
Yeah.
county.
Yeah, the county contacted him.
If you have somebody, I'm willing to reach out to.
Yeah, I'll follow up.
Yeah.
I mean, usually they're pretty good about reaching out to us saying, hey, we have this, this-
That's-
we just haven't heard anything.
I'm surprised they didn't, because that was the conversation. Contact
Now,
Scott.
the last that I got was, you know, under working on a strategic plan that they're starting on, that was just this week, so. But, yeah, it was like itself.
And I know somebody from the library, I believe it was the manager there, was in to get a copy of the master plan. I think they're interested in that as
Yeah,
well. Like
I
some
think that's
reviews or
part of the
adding
whole
to it.
conversation.
Yeah, 'cause it-
And as long as we're budgeting repairs, they're interested in doing that. It's part of our
Yeah, and
plan.
maybe they want to incorporate part of that into their master plan that
Yeah.
they're working on right now, too.
Yeah.
so.
And they're doing a survey right now, so everybody,
Yeah, I'm gonna get a
Please
QR code.
participate.
I just got a QR
Yeah.
code in the mail.
Libraries.
I'm gonna scan and get you guys for their survey, participate in the survey.
Yeah.
We'll get it on the website, too.
it's not budget related, but,
Yep, but it's important.
yep. The next one is the museum, and another building we use, they do a lot of the work there, we don't do a whole lot with it, they maintain it, and, not saying we won't.
Fundraising.
I'm sure that the building does need repairs, and that will be part of the capital plan,
Yeah,
to
there-
see what they need.
I
but-
do want to point one item out to you that Jeff and I spoke about here just in the past couple of weeks. So I went down to the museum to talk with folks down there and peruse the collection and allow them to identify things to me that they thought might be concerns to look at. So we're looking at some, electrical improvements. I mean, we own the building, but I think they're willing to work with us on some of the costs. But one thing that I noticed that was a glaring need for us, and I have put Jeff on the task to at least acquire some cost, is we need to get a heat, fire, and smoke detection system in that building. That building is, from 1850-something, Brian, you might know, it's
I don't
1858
know
or so, does that
exactly,
sound
but it's
right?
very old. Actually,
Yeah.
his
Or I was just saying, so I
partner
mean, I know
works.
with historical discussions, 1850s, I believe. We-
Genevieve would know.
We need to protect the investment that the community has in this building, and it's a nominal cost. The initial cost of getting hardware installed in there is your biggest cost. The monthly monitoring is nothing, but I was surprised. I'm like, are you kidding? We really need to do this.
Yeah, that's-
So that will be coming to you guys. We're gonna also share it with the, historical commission and society. They may have some fundraising monies to be able to help with the hardware purchase, but we really need to do that. in that
Yeah.
building.
And the 5286 is the furnace on the lower left. But that's the biggest thing they've had that we paid for, I think, was the furnace in 21, 22. So that's pretty good. They're great.
Yeah.
And we even discussed, this isn't really budget related, but how many small towns have a museum?
I know.
More than you would expect, actually.
You
Yeah.
just don't know it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the general fund.
They started with the bicentennial.
Moving, or you needed a quick break?
And yeah, anybody need a quick break, or we'll keep moving?
Yeah, let's take
Yeah,
it.
let's take one.
All right,
Commission?
I think we can get,
take 10 minutes?
Sure.
When everybody's back, everybody's back?
wait,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's, okay.
Okay.
We're
All
off to 2.
right, you guys ready? I'm supposed to probably have them come back, aren't I? Ready?
Oh, okay.
all right.
Right, let's continue with part 2.
All right, part 2. So behind the second tab is so street funds is broken up into 2 categories, major streets and local streets. We get funding from the state for both. More major street funds from the state than local streets, but the good news is we are able to move 50% of major street funds into our local street fund for use. So we do that monthly when we receive those funds. Well, we're doing it monthly now. We corrected that in the past. So
Oh.
I can't speak for before, but I can
Yes.
speak for now. So,
Okay.
you'll see revenues is 397,500. Expenditures are projected at 294,690. That includes moving 50% of the 397,500 over to local streets, which gives us a total of 101,810 in the positive. Again, the balance sheet for the major street fund, I did provide that, and you're looking at an ending fund balance of a little over $1 million.
That's yummy.
And both the major street fund and the local fund, when we go through this, are gonna become very important for us once we have completed that PASER
Yes.
study, and then we can go through and then develop a truly solid capital road improvement plan for both major and locals. Something that we have been missing, and again, as I've mentioned before, we've missed some great grant opportunities in the past couple of years. We need pre-stage moving forward, and that way we'll determine, are these going to be full reconstructions, partial reconstructions, mill and fill, general maintenance pieces. All of this basic information, and we can put together with that phaser study, going to be very helpful for us to get a good solid plan. Our residents will be pleased to hear and see something, I'm sure.
And it is very normal to collect those funds for a period of years and then have a project every 3 or 4 or 5 years. It's not common where you take the funds from that year and spend them on a project per se. So to have that fund balance is completely normal.
And we need to make sure two people understand not to take all the stakes and the things out that, I had somebody didn't like the stake in their yard and I had to explain to them, so they've left it, but they would have yanked it out. And those are marking.
To give a reminder, the good thing is, as we're going through right now, is we're GPSing those marks as they go in, so if they have to replace them, but again, technically, should be removing, mistake stakes and survey stakes.
They have F&D right on them. I looked at them and I told them, no, those are for our new project. Please don't remove them.
And we want to remind everyone too, if you've got a question, call. We're glad to tell you what they're for. I mean,
Yeah.
I've even gone through with people myself and said, here's the color codes. Here's
Yes.
what you see when you see ribbons and flags.
Okay.
So revenues, you see, we're projected to get, our state weight and gas tax, and then, no other really revenues. Interest, there is, because we have a larger fund balance, we do project we're gonna have quite a bit more interest this next year, in some sort of investing of some of these funds, depending what the project does. And then, some transfers in, just a basic transfer in for 2,000. So there was some money sitting in this fund that was supposed to be the water sewer, and when we were correcting the balance sheets, cleaning all that up, it got transferred out, so it did decrease that amount. It's about 208,000. It's noted in there. I tried to note things, even if they weren't budget related, why the fund balance may have changed. Then on to expenses, general administration. Streets is mainly DPW wages. We didn't have any full-time wages in here in the previous year. Jeff, the DPW director, his pay was kind of spread between general fund, water, sewer, and with the cost, trying to balance that water sewer fund, we had decided that we were gonna take 12.5% and put it into streets. So that's where that 9,915 comes from. That is his salary.
It always
portion
should-
of his salary.
And it always should have been, because the DPW superintendent is the street administrator through MDOT, both major and local streets. Why it was never allocated there, we don't know.
We don't know.
It's an expenditure that should have been and is now put in the proper place.
Yeah, so we did do a percentage, and it's on this sheet. 12.5% in major and 12.5% local for the streets. So, and then the part-time wages are, part-time DPW employees, and then the fringe benefits. And then you'll see the major, the transfer out's at 50% to the local street fund. Drain, storm, sewer, there isn't much activity in this account. We kind of just kept it status quo, just to have the placeholders, that if there was some expenses, we would have, like the other repairs and maintenance, $1,500. It was budgeted at 2,000 last year. We haven't spent more than 625 in the past 3 years, but to have a little bit of funds,
But some of
set
this might get fixed during our project too.
correct, yeah.
So,
And while we were discussing,
because there are ones that need it. I mean,
right, yeah. And I did this budget, and Scott and I sat down and kind of went line by line, and unfortunately, we are kind of in limbo with that project.
Yeah.
We don't really want to fix, we'll fix things we have to fix, emergency pieces.
Yes.
But until you know
We don't want to pay
what,
twice.
we don't want to
Yes,
pay twice.
exactly.
Make your funds go further. So,
Correct, yeah.
There, storm sewers are under the street also?
Yeah, majority of storm sewers are
Yeah.
under the street
Yeah.
or adjacent to
Yeah.
curb.
Intakes are at the edges of the street, I was just curious.
Right.
They don't go under the sidewalks, they go,
Yeah, for the most
In the
part,
middle.
they don't. We do have, I mean, we have some oddities where we have some catch basins that are behind curb and that may have been there for years, but for the most part, they're curb level and sub-street.
And sometimes they have to flush some of them out, because I know the fire department, he'll go around with the tanker and help DPW, and they'll flush, because you'll get people throwing stuff down even in the storm sewer, that they shouldn't be. Cleaning rags,
yeah.
all sorts of stuff that plugs them up, so.
I mean, you know, I know we hear a lot of people, it's a love-hate on street sweeping.
But,
Street
there's a
sweeping
reason.
isn't just making the street look nice
Right,
and pretty.
right.
Yeah.
It's keeping a lot of that junk
I love
from
it.
getting
drains.
into those drains.
Yes.
So,
yeah,
Do we get money back from the state for doing M29?
yeah, so there's a contract with the county for the largest portion of M29 to do the maintenance. But any portions of any state trunk line that we do, we would have a contract. But
Oh.
most of that work is contracted out to St. Clair County, and which is common along the route.
Oh. I've seen our guys driving the street sweeper.
Yeah, so
On
there's a portion
M29.
that we get reimbursement on.
Okay.
And then we also have, we're working a program set up with the gravel yards
well,
to get reimbursement from them to supplement what they're doing out there. Again, it's
Darn
not a
right.
freebie.
Yeah.
that's a mess down there, yeah.
The next is routine maintenance, again, wages and all the costs that go with it, and then, there hasn't been much change. We did reduce, the other repairs and maintenance from last year, again, knowing that some of this routine maintenance may not happen when a big project's coming. Yep. Bridge maintenance, again, wages, and then we did add, contractual services, 3,000 for possible engineering work. There's some engineering, the bridge needs to be looked at.
This is the Biff Bridge.
Yep,
Yeah,
so.
we don't own the other one.
We added that cost there, try a placeholder that we know that's probably at the beginning of the fiscal year that's happening.
And we know that our engineering firm that we're planning on bringing on board, they have bridge inspection services that they can conduct.
Yeah.
And we've had that discussion already. Also, Mr. Mayor, thank you for sharing some information with me that you dug out that we have been struggling to get from MDOT on the other bridge. And I think there's inaccuracies in their information. because
Probably.
They may have inspected on the Bell River Bridge, they being MDOT, they may have inspected the structural integrity as far as the columns and the steel, but we have concrete failure. And that's one piece that we're trying to get some answers on. There's concrete failure, and I was educated a little bit today in the engineering world that generally they're looking at structural supports and steel and decking, that surface concrete isn't necessarily,
Right.
it's identified as a cosmetic piece. It's a cosmetic piece until it falls onto your kayak or canoe.
Yeah.
And then I think it's more than a cosmetic.
Yeah.
You're gonna need a lot of cosmetics.
But at least they give you, that 81 is when they just did the decking, and that's all they did back
So
then.
we're still pressing,
It's 1938, that bridge.
we're still pressing forward on some more
Yeah.
answers of what a long-term capital plan is and what is the short-term solution for these pieces that
Yeah.
are coming. So, thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, I happened to find that when I was looking around.
Good find.
So we're hoping 3,000 covers the engineering cost on that piece, so. Ice and snow removal, same thing, wages for removing, DPW workers and all their, you'll see road and street material went down a little bit, because of the year we've had with climate. Jeff said they say they're gonna buy so much, so we're stuck. We can't say we're not gonna
Yeah.
take our last little bit, so the bin over there is full.
And in some cases,
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
of you will recall, we've had to go and do a mid-season order in the
Mid-season,
past.
yeah.
For
So
salt.
it
Yeah,
always
for
moves
salt.
back and
Yeah.
forth, but hey, we've got a good start for next year.
So now it's full, like, he's like, we have no space for any salt because we've had so next year, we're not gonna need as much.
Yeah.
That was,
And let's hope it doesn't snow then either.
yeah, yeah. And then that's that. That's the big one on there. Traffic service, same thing, wages, minimum wages, and then we did, of contractual services because we want to get some updates on the pedestrian signals, so.
Yeah, because I know, now the one over at, by the Lions Club, the one's missing. And when it fell over, I went through the video at the Lions Club. It's there 1 minute and it fell over. We think what happened is the garbage truck comes in there and we think you couldn't see it and the arm caught the edge of it and weakened it enough that all of a sudden one day it just fell over, it cracked. Now, when I talked to Mike when he was here, all you needed was the base piece, and he didn't know how to just get the base piece, and he could have put the thing back up. They had the rest of it, but
I think we've got,
we think the garbage truck is the one that did that, but we know
there might be some signalization pieces that we'd have to pay for the most part, though we think they're gonna be able to qualify a lot of the connecting pieces in with the TAP grant.
Yeah, okay.
Unit at South Main, just before the bridge,
Yep.
did not function last night when I tried it after dark anyway.
Oh, really?
This is not,
think one
I pushed
side
the
does,
button
one
and it went beep. I mean, it did that, and I'm looking up, waiting for the lights to,
Yeah.
and nothing.
yeah, and this is not the first time in the past couple of months that we've had this, and then when we've gone out and checked it, it's worked fine. There's obviously an issue there.
Yeah.
Because,
I mean, it was like
it's not the first time.
9:30, so,
Okay.
and it was yesterday was kind of muggy, right? Or was
It
it
was nice.
sunny?
Decent,
But it was getting dark, the clouds were coming in though in the evening.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, give it the benefit of the doubt that maybe the solar didn't charge,
Yeah.
or
And
something.
luckily, you can see the light, but if somebody couldn't, they're waiting for that sound or whatever.
Yeah, yesterday was a good solar
Other-
day, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we've had that.
I was inside.
Last
yeah.
2 days, yeah.
I didn't get out much, but I
Yeah.
did see some sun shining, so.
Yeah, no, the only thing it did was beep, and the teeny, red LED on the button was the only thing that lit. But everything else was, the white flashing lights
Checked
did
again. I mean, we've
nothing.
had a couple problems with it out there, so,
Yeah. And I've seen it operational before, years ago, but yeah, anyway.
thank you.
Next one, non-motorized transportation. This is a minimal budget, but we did keep the supply costs in if needed, and then we added engineering costs here as well.
Okay.
Is this for the police bikes?
No, this is really not to get run over. They're leaving the station, wait, isn't that the one that the buttons are missing on?
Yeah.
We need, good tie-in though, thanks. We're giving them flashlights this year, Commissioner, it's already blue ones, blue and red.
The next one is street cleaning. We just talked about
Yeah.
that. So the wages for that, and the equipment repairs and the sweeper's paid for now, right?
Yeah.
Yep, sweeper's paid for. So that is major streets. The next tab is local streets. You'll see revenue coming in of $355,000. That includes money from the state plus the transfer in from the major street fund. Expenditures of $164,960 with a balance of $190,040. Again, the fund balance at this point is about $730,000 in local streets, which is a pretty good chunk, actually. So, I talked about the revenues, the state weight and gas tax we get from that, some interest we're projecting to have in our bank accounts, and then, we had to transfer some funds. Again, this is just some little accounting notes here. There was about $3,000 in this account that should have been in water sewer, so we're gonna have to transfer that out. So you'll see a reduction in fund balance. And then you'll see coming in $196,000 from the major street fund. And then, crack sealant for our local roads. That's it, it's a pretty basic budget. Yep. General administration, again, is payroll. Just like major streets, we did move 12.5% of the DPW supervisor's wage to local streets. I want to say too, I did check with Curtis to make sure that was okay, that we were allowed to use street funds for that expense, and he did agree and say, yes, it's totally fine. He was actually surprised We had, so, yeah, so it's totally fine, to do that. So same thing, all of the fringe with that, and then, we do have some rentals. Sometimes they have to, the DPW have to rent a piece of equipment to do a repair or something they're working on, so we have that in there. It's very minimal cost. Any questions here? Drain, storm sewer, pretty much these two funds, major, local, they mirror. We take the cost and split it in half. And one half goes to major and half goes to local. So these numbers are pretty much the same in both funds, so. Any questions on this?
Can you say a little bit more about the big change in the contractual services
Yeah.
budget item?
Again, the engineering costs possible.
Okay.
Possibly needed. We put a little bit in every section of the budget,
Yeah.
just so that it wouldn't all hit general fund. And if it was a local street project, it would be charged here. If it was a major street project, it'll be charged there. So it really depends on maybe a project going on, but we wanted to have a placeholder for engineering costs.
All right.
And we think we're gonna level back down to what is the normal average. We had higher in
I see.
anticipation in the current year.
Yeah.
on some
Right,
drain
right.
projects.
Okay.
Yeah.
Drain project, or was that all the stuff F&V did to prep for the grant?
No.
Oh,
This,
okay.
this was actually dealing with some other issues, storm drain issues that we had.
Okay.
so.
And then-
All the costs for the project come out of water sewer.
Okay.
Yep.
Didn't Mike like smoke the drains or something like that? I thought he did something.
They
Yeah,
had
it might-
some
yeah.
drain
Yeah.
testing where they did for cross connections and things like
Right.
that. But this was actually more some repair pieces. We had
Okay.
a couple of drains. You guys remember, we had a water leak piece
Yeah.
that
We
we
had
couldn't
to
find.
hire, yeah.
And then when we
Shine-a-lot,
found out
yeah.
why we couldn't find it, it's because it was going to this large section of drain. That was a lot of big cost
Yeah.
included in that.
Yeah.
That was pretty big, pretty big piece of pipe.
Routine maintenance, same thing, wages, and then fringe benefits, and then, cost for engineering, repairs. Not a lot to say. Same thing, ice and snow control, we, kind of split these costs with, major streets.
Dump truck.
Yeah, dump truck, we're getting a dump truck.
We already made those budgets.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah. Oh,
We did. Those were done last
Last
meeting.
time, yeah.
those were the transfers that were in the budget to transfer in. We most likely will have budget amendments coming after
Okay.
this, for this year's,
Or right, yeah.
yep,
Those were fund transfers, correct?
yes,
Sorry.
yep.
Not budget amendments.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Those, just like, when we say the transfers are in here, we're moving money back and forth, that's what those are for. Traffic service, same thing. This is pretty dry, sorry.
That's some of your Ward Street pieces on that one.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, Ward Street, yeah. Non-motorized transportation, same thing. Street cleaning,
Not an exciting part of the budget.
same thing. Yeah, and that's it.
Water.
Here comes the fun part of the budget.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the water sewer fund, in the past, well, we have revenues coming in and expenditures going out, but some of the revenues coming in need to be immediately restricted. The past few years, they may not have been showing that, so it may have been showing more of a surplus than we actually had. So you'll see on this recap that we listed the revenues, the expenditures, and we had a subtotal of $424,410. And then you'll see all the restrictive funds that we received in the revenue coming back out, so that we move them into a restrictive fund because we can only use them on certain things.
So the money's there, it's just restricted.
It's just restricted, correct. And then you'll see our capital costs, so we have to pay our drinking water revolving fund principal payment for the water plant. Luckily, this is the second from last payment we will be making on that. So we have $150,000 in 2025, and then 2026 will be our last payment to pay that off.
So keep in mind that once these bond payments are done, unless we had some other little ancillary project, you're going to have some moving capital that each year as we go forward, even though we're gonna have this long-term revolving fund project, each year as part of the budget process, we are still going to have the ability to go through and make adjustments to that, residential equivalency rate. So whatever we can do to offset costs has been pledged to go forward. We know that we're going to have to bond for a certain amount, but if we are able to make additional bond payments at some, even though there's a schedule, we can set that money aside and be able to have it. And whatever we can do to adjust other components of the budget to offset that, this will help.
And the positive is, we're paying this off right about the same time that the new bond will be coming, so we won't be having two bond payments at once. So that'll be good. And then lab equipment replacement, there's water monitoring, we have to pay for that, electrical repairs and cleanup at the water plant, the water tower annual contract. So all these costs are coming out, and in the past, we may not have been using the restricted funds to pay for them. It might have just been coming off the top.
And we
Putting
should have
those,
been?
we should have been. We should have been. Yep, so, even though the water tower is an annual contract and we pay annually, we can use those restricted, ready-to-serve funds to pay for that. We have to do it. It's a cost. So you'll see, restrict the funds, and then we come back and put 229,180 into using those funds for major bond payments and capital outlay.
I want to point out to you,
Yep.
the line, water monitoring kind of jarred my mind. So you all know that we participate in a water monitoring system.
Yeah.
That's a very robust system, being able to do early detection on any leaks. At one point, when that system was installed, and for a number of years, that was fully grant funded, and the grant went away, each municipality had to take that on our own shoulders. I just received news today that there is an opportunity for a grant that may again cover that cost. SEMCOG is going to be working on trying to coordinate that regionally through the Huron Lake Erie watershed area. I'm hopeful, because there is a decent bucket of federal money, that we can get into part of that, and that will help offset our monitoring costs for hopefully a number of years going forward, and maybe even pay for some costs of regular equipment upgrades and maintenance. We had to pay this current year, not a lot of money, but I think we paid like $2,600 or $2,800 of equipment update and repair costs to keep the system going. It's a valuable system, and if we can get the grant piece again, that's great.
Yeah, it was put in way back when John Gaber was here. We were doing it, and then everybody got out of it except for us. We kept it because there was a big cry from everybody too. They wanted to make sure if something gets dumped in the river, we get early notification. So we were the only ones that had it for a
It
while.
was a shame how it happened, because I mean,
Yeah.
again, it was like, money's done.
Yes.
And now you had to take on all of the maintenance costs, all the
Yeah.
operation costs, all the equipment.
And we
costs.
did.
Many communities couldn't do it.
Yeah,
But this will be refreshing if this
Yeah.
funding comes through.
be real nice.
I'll keep you posted.
This is for the wind system, that if
No.
there's a,
No,
or just
this-
for leakage?
No,
This is river water or intake.
say there's a spill out in the river
Okay.
and it's coming down, moving this direction. Everybody had monitoring systems in there to see
You
what
can
kind of
get an alert on
chemicals
screen
were.
for Notification, which could activate.
So you're
that
welcome
wind system
Algonac,
notification.
basically, is what I'm hearing. But if St. Clair took theirs out, then we won't know, right?
Everybody had them,
They have them back in now, but what
Oh,
happened for the longest period of time, and I know I had left St. Clair at that point.
yeah.
When the grant funding ended, I mean, it was pretty
Yeah.
expensive, probably $8,000-10,000 a year, and a lot of communities couldn't support to do that.
But we had such an outcry here. We had a big meeting. People wanted it done because they were concerned about the water, and so we kept it.
And this is part of why we have high water costs. Why, it's consistently a feeling among our.
Well, some of it is, but some of it's we had to put those ready-to-serve fees in, and that was a mandate from the state, because we weren't putting money away to maintain the system, so they forced you into that too, so that's another thing that got added in there.
That's what a lot of residents and users don't understand. I mean, we're required to have a ready-to-serve charge, and
Yeah.
whether any gallons of water flow through your individual pipes at your house,
Yes.
we still have to have the system there, maintained, and have a protocol, a capital plan, and funding mechanism in place for repairs and maintenance. We're required by state regulations.
And then when we lost a lot of industry, that was another thing.
Yep.
All the big water users left, and so that puts the burden back onto the
You still have
taxpayer.
the
But yet we have
cost,
the
but now cost
infrastructure to
shared by
support
fewer.
that.
Yeah.
So would this potential SEMCOG grant affect water costs?
It likely wouldn't, the way it looks right now is it wouldn't be a huge dollar amount.
Okay.
But again, if we can cover $5,000 or $6,000 of the
Yeah.
cost for the equipment, I mean, that is a savings. That's
Yep.
certainly a
little
difference that we wouldn't have to pay. But it's not of a significant amount that anybody would see really a change in a water bill.
Okay.
But, you know, again, theoretically, if they can cover, you know, replacements of equipment at some point, that's potentially something that would be a benefit for us.
What did the water assessment say we were supposed to raise the rates by? I thought we had a water assessment done, and you said they were supposed to raise, they suggested that we raise them by like 14% or 7% or something ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't remember. I mean,
That's in-
normally they were only
There was a
done,
rate study done, and I
Yeah.
mean, we have copies of it here. I perused through it at one point,
Yeah.
and the increases that were projected, and again, understanding on what the requirements are.
Sure.
I can see why auditors and actuarials would say, you need to do this, because they took into effect, you know, a lower amount of users and things like that, lower amount of gallons, but you still have the facilities you have to pay for.
Right.
But it was almost impossible to do that.
Yeah.
Again, I think that the route that you took was the most prudent route.
Yeah.
But we also know that we have a reliance on having to utilize fund balance the best that we can to fill any gaps. But
Yeah.
how can you do that?
I mean, you're basically supposed to be able to rebuild your infrastructure
Yep.
at some point in time, and we have so much extra. And it's not that it's unnecessary, but you know, it's a big system.
Yeah, and it's a heavy burden, you know.
Yeah.
We have less business, we have 600 less residents in the past 10 years than we've had.
Right.
Those potentially were
So it's spread
200
thinner.
users.
Thank you.
Anyway,
So, we are projecting to use some of these restricted funds for, water monitoring, and then this screw pump still is not replaced from last year.
yeah.
It was in the budget last year. Those temporary pumps are
I've heard they're
expensive,
Really expensive.
but necessary.
Sure, yeah.
So,
Required, yeah.
we have to do it, so, you know, there's 55,000 budgeted, out of the ready to serve fees to cover that until that's replaced. We're hoping it's replaced in the next,
Within
I
the
did-
next couple of months.
I did
I
5
think you all heard
months.
from Jeff, it's his annual report that he is working aggressively with the manufacturers. We're limited on manufacturers. He's trying to work aggressively and making sure we get those replaced and that we stop, you know, paying the excessive rental costs. Is there any credit for us for the rentals we've had? It's plain, let's make a deal. But the ultimate, you know, goal is, let's get this job done. Let's be finished
Yeah.
with this.
The
So,
rental company is the same as the installation company?
it's the same pump manufacturer company. We're renting from the manufacturer, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, who also
That's-
sells them. They have the market cornered. I
Right.
mean, we kind of have, you know, the problem, these are proprietary pumps.
yeah.
It's a weird world in utilities, that they're proprietary pumps, and you know, you may be able to find a similar pump. By the time you go through the cost of the retrofit of the pump and replacing everything else, you still end up being 3 times the charge. It's just, it's unfortunate, and it's in every municipal operation like this.
you know,
You have 1 or 2 pump manufacturers, and they hold the keys to the kingdom.
So we have a ending balance of about $610. This is with you know, our suggestion is to raise rates by 2%, a 2% increase for metered water and metered sewer, and just keeping the ready to serve fees as they are, unchanged.
I do want to point out on the rate increase piece, it is obviously less than what the rate study that was done a couple of years ago, which projected out a number of years, called for. It is also significantly less than the necessary almost 5% for us to keep up with an inflation piece, because we understand that there is a significant project that's going to be coming on board. We can cover the cost, we can utilize fund balance that we have, but this, I want to caution that this is not an every year piece that we can always guarantee that it's only going to be 2%, only going to be 2%. I mean, we're bearing the extra inflationary cost by utilizing our fund balance that we've been able to put forward, which does affect long-term capital, you know, projects. But it's a necessary piece right now. to keep things in check, because we know that we have this significant project coming on board.
With added costs.
Does
And I
that,
believe last year was 2.5%. So we're even less than last year's increase, but we're being very cognizant to keep it in check.
is this setting us up for a much larger increase down the road, 2, 3, 5 years?
Well, that's the worry. I think boy, I hate to say this, but this could be my last meeting with you guys. No, because I hate to say this in the sense, I'm not gonna lie to anybody. The fact is, if we had a study that was conducted that said, based on this many users, industrial, commercial, residential, you need to raise your rates every year this percentage. And because, again, I'm not saying that it was done incorrectly, because you feel for your residents and you're trying to do the best thing you can do, you're trying to be good stewards of their money and using fund balance and other mechanisms. Okay, if our recommendation was last year to raise it 6% and we only did 2.5%, and this year we maybe should do 4.7, we're only doing 2%. Yeah, at some point we are gonna be a catch-up in what the formulary or the money has called for. But I think that there is a big factor to put into play here. The water project, the big project that's coming, in all likelihood is going to change those numbers and necessitate for us to do a new rate study anyway, because we're going to be taking care of a lot of water loss that we've had in the system. We're going to be taking care of undersized lines that were not functioning properly, that were prone to breaks and leakage, and we're going to make significant improvements in the water filtration plant, which is more energy efficient. So with that said, yeah, we'll probably have an adjustment, but I think if everything works as the engineers have said, that adjustment isn't going to be at the same level as originally projected without doing any of this work. I mean, we're putting significant improvements into the system that's going to lift that burden that we've already baked in a previous study. It kind of replaces a lot of that. So I think it will require a new rate study at the end, because the investments we're putting in are surely going to eliminate some things that were identified before and are going to be more cost effective going forward than they are now.
And then you get people, you raise the rates, they use less, so then it costs more. So
Right.
that, you hate to look at it that way, but that's just the way
That's what happened.
it comes into. Now, hopefully, if we get a couple of these bigger projects where we'll have more water, if we get that apartment complex, that'll help because it adds more water users to the system.
That was my next question. The only real way to offset having increases coming down the line is an
Bring
increase
more
in
in.
population.
Or industrial, more industrial, because we lost a couple big plants down here, and those were huge water users.
And to put a fine pin on this is actually restoring us to previous population industrial levels. It's not even necessarily talking about expanding or developing
Yeah.
beyond what we have. It's
Yeah.
going back to our capacity.
When Paclite and St. Clair Plastics and all those moved out, we lost some huge water users.
And even on those, you're trying to get back to residential. You're trying to make up, again, through a multiple family development, that you're gonna have potentially, 300 residents there. You're now catching up half of what your population loss was, and we have some equivalent. So I think that those factors coming in of redevelopment, new development, and then the major improvements to the system are gonna help. It's gonna put us in a position that we need to do a revised rate study.
Yeah.
And maybe that rate study may still have some increases, but
Yeah.
they're likely not going to be at the rate that they were once projected at. And then, again, technology changes all the time too. We're gonna see technology upgrades with this project that are certainly going to help us, especially on detecting any type of system issues and eliminating, undetermined loss. When you run the water through the plant and you filtrate and treat that water, you're having to treat all of that. You're hoping that when it goes out, it gets delivered to everybody, but when you have loss in the system, you still had to pay the end cost back here to get that water. This will help all of that.
You're still treating it, you're still,
Yeah, but now we know we're treating it and not losing it. We're treating it and getting to end user.
Yeah.
Right now, in an old system like this, we have a good amount of loss that just happens from the age of the system.
Thank you.
So, I did put in here, it was on last year's budget, so I thought I would put it on this one, the fund balances at the end of the last fiscal year, the audited, right on the bottom of the recap sheet. As of last year. So we do have some money in the coffer, but with this project coming up, we keep saying with this project, but it's such a huge
Yeah.
project that there may be some funds moving and,
Right, and keep
pieces.
in mind, the project covers a good portion of the system.
Right.
It doesn't cover the whole system, so those other pieces that we have out there that aren't covered, that's why we still need to have the money in for maintenance and repair and upkeep and maintenance.
and then you'll see the usage information. Mary Ellen did this last year, we continued it this year. We just basically take a 5-year average of, usage and use those numbers to calculate our revenues and usage for this year. So,
This is the one that says water sewer usage information for rate increase
Yeah.
of 2%.
yep, so you'll see 5 years, so you'll see, the top is the first section is the city average usage, the second is Cotterville, and then, you take the difference out, and then the sewer usage, and then we use these numbers on the next sheet, with the projected 2% rate increase, so you'll see the water, it goes from 773 to 788, per
1,000.
thousand, yep.
1,000 gallons, yeah.
Yep, sewer from 612 to 624, and then Cotterville's would go from 1159 to 1182. So you do the annual revenue calculations, and this is the amounts we use, the highlighted parts are what we use for the revenues. You'll see the last part, the total increase, is about $6.65 quarterly for an average user. So you're looking, if you divide that by 3, $2.20-something cents a month.
So,
Due to the increase.
yeah.
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 due
So
to
again,
that
we know
2%.
that when you hear 2%, it's frightening.
Yeah,
And we're not
Yeah.
hiding in any way, shape, or form that
No.
there's an increase. But that 2% equates to, about 12 cents, per gallon, 15 cents, I should say, per 1,000 gallon of water. I should say, 12 cents per 1,000 of sewer, $2 a month, $6 a quarter. I mean, we're trying to break it down that way
Right.
so everybody gets a more,
Yeah.
palatable understanding. Because 2%, with just saying 2%, could be anything. It is a minimal amount compared to what we could or should be doing, and we designed it that way
Yeah.
purposely right now, so we get this other project done and can refactor.
and it's on a 24,000 gallon usage, so if your family uses less than that, it obviously would be less. If they use more, it could be a little more.
We've talked about with this large water project that there will be an increase in water fees then. But that's not going to be kicking in for some time. This is immediate for next year.
Right,
There will be whatever that end cost of the bond ends up being for the $13 million portion.
Right.
Which was originally anticipated to be $14 and
Yep.
change. Again, we're working of trying to go backwards of any extra money that we can put into it from our existing fund to offset it by dropping of a bond at some point, by revising ordinances. Right now, our ordinance calls for, single-family residential equivalent units by meter size, but it doesn't call for multiple families. So again, if you as a resident are paying X amount of dollars, $14 a month, if you as a owner of a 14-unit apartment complex only pay $14 a month, we're changing that. It should be by residential equivalent. So $14 for one unit, $14 times 14 if you have 14 units. That's going to help us too. That's going
Yeah.
to level the playing field because a residential equivalent user is a residential equivalent user, no matter what structure you're living in. So,
But these are separate increases that are happening at different times.
and it's going to be a separate piece,
Yeah.
correct? And we anticipate with the timing right now, which isn't completely defined through the bonding process, that there would be a bond sale to finance the project that'll likely be August or September of this year. So generally, when that sale goes through, I would anticipate on the scale of things, again, the bond professionals will shore all this up with us. We wouldn't have our first payments coming in until 2025.
Okay.
And usually there are 2 payment periods a year. I mean, we'll set aside the money, we have to collect the money every quarter to set aside, but we'll disperse twice a year, usually on an April-November schedule for bond payments. Could be different, but that's usually what they are. And then, again, as we can adjust and look forward, the dollar amount of the project is gonna be the dollar amount, the bond is gonna be the amount, we have to sell it in advance, and it's a revenue payment bond, meaning we have to pay it back by revenue we make. But that portion, we can then have a better gauge of adjusting
Okay.
what the charge back to the users is. It's not like a tax piece. Here's X amount of mills and this is your cost.
Right.
A revenue bond is a revenue bond, we know the dollar amount, and we can fluctuate based upon other resources and variables here. And that's been our job from day one, is to look and make sure we do the best we can to keep that amount going in a lower direction, not a higher direction to get this done.
Thank you.
So any questions on the calculations? No? And then the next sheet is the ready to serve rates. We didn't change those, so it's based on meter size for water, meter size for sewer, and the estimate is the proposed, budget for those amounts. And then we go on to revenues, more revenues than those. So, if you go down the list, other than the meter sales is our biggest revenue driver, obviously, and our ready-to-serve fees. There is a line in here for sewer contract. That is our sewer contract with Contraville Township. People who've been around a while probably know this fluctuates from year to year depending on our OPEB, liabilities, things like that. Curtis did suggest, I guess, a few years back to maybe come up with a more stable way of calculating this in the contract, but with some changes in personnel and things like that, it didn't really happen. I will tell you, when you just approved the little over $75,000 overage, we were overcharging them that amount. We have to pay it back, because we only pay them on their usage, and it's projected. So the projection is about $115,000 for the upcoming year, with the goal to sit with Curtis and come up with a number that isn't so year after year changing. It could be high one year, low the next. We kind of want to keep it
We're looking
more
at
even.
restructuring the way we do that, to actually look at more of an average piece with a look back, instead of the way we're doing it now.
With
It's a
guesstimating,
little clunky. This way it provides some stability, and then has a built-in mechanism for a look-back adjustment, but it's more based on actual true averages instead of kind of a blindfolded dart throw. And I don't like to describe it at that, but
That's what
in a
it
way,
is.
that's what it is. That's really
Yeah.
what it is.
Yep. Same thing, interest, and then insurance premiums, coming in, we still have we don't have any employees that work in the wastewater department or the, water department. It's all contracted out, but we still have retirees paying that, portion in for insurance premiums. So that's what that is. And, that's it for wastewater. And then water revenues, same thing, ready to serve, monitored sales, or monitored fees, metered sales are the main, income for these funds.
Is the penalties and interest on taxes, like people who pay late, stuff like that? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm gonna be honest, my first year of doing tax, doing the tax roll here, we're pretty fortunate. We don't have that many
A
people.
lot of late
I mean,
payers or no
not-
payers.
Paying late, or
No, we have
I
a really
mean,
good number
we're-
of people who are
the percentage
on time
of
with
money
the
we
payments.
get collected is pretty high compared to some other municipalities. So, yeah, that would be penalties and interest on taxes for that. Basically, if delinquent water went to their taxes, the penalties and interest on that.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Interest, same thing, hydrant usage revenue coming into there. That's for township as well.
So like
And
the
then-
fire authority pays us? Gotcha.
Yeah. That's it.
Good deal.
And then, expenses, so general administration for sewer, this is, Again, all our wages on this wage sheet, a lot of us are paid out of water and sewer, so it's a combination of most employees, most administrative staff, and that's the cost. Yep, so it takes our wages and breaks it down. Part-time, same thing. Fringe benefits all correlate, you know, we pay the 6.2% for FICA, we pay the 1.45% for Medicare and all of them. Cash in lieu of benefits, and then the OPEB went down. It's projected next year, which I know you had brought up that the actuarial reports, you haven't seen them yet. They're going to the retiree board this month, and then they'll come commission after, but those numbers are based on that. The actuarial tells us we have to pay so much per year, and you take your retirees, a percent, you know, take the percent of retirees that were from water, sewer, and you have to take that percentage out for OPEB here, so.
I think it's important to note too that because of our timing and our requirements by the charter of when we have to adopt the budget,
Right.
unfortunately, usually we don't have the action on those actuarial studies and approval by the pension board until after we've been required to, you know, to approve the budget. The same thing with our annual insurance cost on property and liability and our annual health care. We don't usually get that renewal information until late in May to approve in June. Our budget already had to be approved, so we often have to go back and true up the numbers by way of budget amendments at some point through the course of the year, because it's just a timing thing. We don't have those. Most of those items are aligned to coincide with like a July 1st piece, which is sure the beginning of the fiscal year, but we have to prepare and approve a budget, you know,
Prior
a
to
month and a
that.
half or 2 months, 2 months prior. So, you know, keep in mind that as those come in, we'll see other pieces. We've baked in as much as we could in here on anticipated costs of where we think the studies will come in on actuarial, because we can eyeball and at least say, okay, we have fewer employees that still remain on the system. We know that healthcare trends are going to be X amount of percent. We know that, you know, property liability are going to be X amount, but they are just hopefully good placeholder numbers, but we can't true them up for yet a couple months on that.
This is a perfect example when you hear longevity costs at municipalities. We're still covering employees from years ago because this is where they worked. So,
When we see a decrease in, say, the pension plan, this is not a decrease because we're paying them less per person, correct?
No, it necessarily, what it really equates to is we have less people who are still active in the plan.
Okay.
So, and generally in the case of retirements,
Right.
it's usually people who have passed on and they're no longer on the books, and so that's the adjustment.
But we're not lowering any coverage.
Right.
No.
we're not-
But we still have to pay a certain amount to cover the pensions and the
Right.
health care, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's requirements that what we have to pay.
Yeah, I was just making sure we weren't, I didn't want to
Yeah,
see us
no.
decreasing the
Yeah.
coverage
Yeah,
per
no.
person or anything
No,
like
there's
that.
no changes,
Nope.
and these are all older systems that are on board,
Yep.
but they're still the same, and we have to fund at a certain level.
There's only what, who's left, Jim and Jim
Two,
from
Left.
the original,
in the old
Yeah.
pension plan.
Jim Heslop and Jim Vandermeer.
active employees still in the old, and then we still have a number of retirees
Yeah.
and spouses that may have been covered
Yeah,
on the plan.
but I mean, they're the only two working still.
Yeah, they're the only ones. Right, again, which, you know, for us, I mean, thankfully, we're a smaller community and don't have a lot of those numbers out there as far as people-wise. I mean, there are plenty of, this is what's caused the problem for most municipalities to be in the problem that they're in, because they had very rich, healthy, long-term, you know, healthcare and retiree programs, pensions, and those are on the books, and they're obligated for those. And you have fewer employees coming in, you have employees in different, there's 401s, 457s. There are a lot of municipalities that are in deep trouble because they have long-term legacy costs that just don't go away quickly. Here, we're in a good position, and, you know, we're keeping the same plans, we're maintaining, we're making our payments, but every year we get closer to a different world that we're looking at as far as costs and things, which is not bad, but you have an obligation to take care of what's already there.
And then property vehicle, we just put, when we sat down, we said the DART, we're like, well, inflation rate about 3.75, so we added that. These property and liability insurance costs could come in higher, could come in the same. we're suspecting they're gonna increase a little bit, so.
We felt that the adjustments, and a lot of you that were in those seats last year, most of you, new one for you, you missed the pain on this one. We had a pretty good size adjustment last year because we were undervalued on a number of properties. They weren't insured to the proper level for replacement. We had a couple that were overinsured, but we did a lot of work to kind of right-size those policies last year, which had an increase, I think $10,000, $11,000 increase. So hopefully the biggest jump was last year, but this year, there were a lot of catastrophic claims that occurred last year across the state between wind and hail and those storms. The industry trend right now is that property, liability, and auto insurance are all going up, and we all see them as homeowners. Commercial is no difference. I don't know what the percentage is going to be. We think we put a pretty good number in there because the bulk of our adjustments were last year on bringing values up, right? So, we're going to know, that will be coming to us. We got some healthcare information, that we're gonna be discussing next week, and usually right on the heels of that is the property and liability.
We gonna bid that one out again and look for other?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna take a look at it, and we need to look at both the healthcare piece of, we're again in a very awkward position here because we're a small community that a lot of agents just don't even want to bid.
Yeah.
We don't have enough bodies. Property and liability for municipalities is about as difficult because there are really only 2, 3,
Yeah.
possibly 4 main carriers that insure municipalities across the state. And they're all usually pretty close on what their costs are. But we're gonna know, we're gonna get those in, and we're gonna be able to take a look at those, and those are expected anytime to say, okay, do we have enough time to get this out, turn around, and take a good look at it? Because they come to us, end of April, 1st of May, and we have to have everything back into them usually by mid-June for a July 1st start. So it's a quick turnaround once we get them, but we don't know what the numbers are yet.
Yeah.
So,
We are fortunate, we have more employees who opt out of insurance than take it, and it saves the city quite a bit of money. But we still have to have insurance for those full-time employees who want it. But it's hard to find a plan when you have that little amount of people to insure. That's where we,
that's
that's
our
where we
difficulty.
struggle.
And there's been a very clunky thing, and I know it's late, I don't want to talk all night for you guys, but I think it's important to understand that in the state of Michigan, there have been efforts for years to try to come up with consolidated insurance pools for municipalities. And usually those run into statutory obstacles and regulatory obstacles. So, that's frustrating for us because we aren't on the same playing field sometimes as, certainly for private for-profit businesses that can go to an insurance pool or different things and work together. We're kind of on an island on our own, and municipal insurance is a specialization. So we keep trying, we keep hoping that, modifications come, but it's difficult.
So any questions on, sewer, I think I might have skipped a page. But system maintenance, sewer, same sort of thing, wages, fringe, and the extra costs, it's pretty basic. And then the next is a wastewater treatment plant. The only thing I want to really note on this is where the screw pump, costs for those temporary pumps are. So we put 40,000 in there, hope it covers it.
We had some previously allocated budgeted amounts.
Yep.
This is the carryover, and again, I know Jeff is aggressively working on this, he's very frustrated. But
Yeah.
again, we're doing the best we can to get those replaced. We all can't stand looking at them, listening to them, and waiting for answers from companies.
The one main big increase is processed chemicals for both plants are going up drastically. I mean, just like our groceries, it's going up drastically. So we had to increase those, more than we probably would have wanted to. But you have to have it. So
Over
that's one of
50%.
those things. Same thing with lab supplies. It's all just going up in price. So we have that. We're hoping the electrical's budgeted pretty high at 90,000. It seems as if those temporary pumps are also using more electrical. So once the new screw pump is in, hopefully those costs will come down a little bit as well.
Well, I think too, the other piece is that, when you've had two pumps, but only one has been working and it's overworking, I mean, you're not getting the most efficiency
Right.
out of a dual pump
Right.
operating system.
Yeah. So we did put, the repairs in here, the 15,000, that was also on the first sheet where said we were going to use some of our restricted funds. Jeff is anticipating when they do actually go and replace the screw pump, there may be additional things that just happen, when you open up a wall. There's always these extra little things, so he wanted to make sure we had some funds set aside just in
Electrical.
case.
Little buffer, yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, just in case for that.
Pipe A doesn't fit with pipe B.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
need a sleeve.
Yeah, so that's in there. Next is the pump lift station. This stayed pretty consistent. We haven't had any major issues with that.
Has that one been fixed out on King Road, that issue?
Yeah, that I'm aware of. I don't think we had any other issues since then, so.
Okay.
So this just stayed pretty
The
status
constant
quo.
burning light,
Yeah,
bump those.
but again, electric costs are projected to go up quite a bit, so we had to budget for that. And then general administrative water, again, employee costs. This is where all us employees are all encapsulated into a portion of our wages in there. And then we had an increase with city manager wages, we projected in there. All the fringe reduction, and then, again, same thing, the pension plan costs are going down. Liability insurance up, based on, we talked about all that. And then, interest expenses. That is for the interest from the bond. So that'll be gone in 2026 as well. System maintenance, the water plant. We talked about a lot of this wages, and then the water tower annual contract is about 25,000 every year. If you notice, it's not in here the last few years. It was being charged to the wrong line item, so we fixed that. It's supposed to be being split, and it wasn't. So we have that, and then equipment repairs, and then other maintenance, or other repairs and maintenance at about 32,000. Again, this was kind of a shot in the dark. One year we had 46,000, one year we had 20,000. We had to kind of average out, what we think. I mean, the good news is, hopefully with this project, we won't be having a ton of these repairs.
We would actually hope that this number comes in
Comes down,
lower.
comes in
Because a
lower,
lot
yeah.
of the components are going to be
In
as
that
part of the
project,
project.
yeah.
So,
Yep, there's that. Then the water plant costs. So even though Jeff doesn't, Jeff, the DPW director, doesn't work in the water plant per se, his wages come out of this spot because he's an administrator of the water plant. So we have to put him there. So those are all the employee costs, lab supplies, contractual services is F&V. They run our water plant. And then the water monitoring services, we'll use restricted funds for that. Electric costs are big, you'll see that's a big one on there. And then equipment repairs, again, all normal budgeted items. And then the last page, it just listed some of the capital expenditures and what account they were gonna come off. This is mainly for me, so that when they come in to be paid, I remember what line we budgeted it for, so.
Sorry, back to contractual services on water system maintenance, water. Why did we go from 200,000 down to 25?
Which,
You had projected activity is almost 200,000 and then requested budget is only 25.
yeah, these are those
Oh, that's the pumps?
pumps.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
We've been having, it is an excessive cost to be having those pumps.
Sure,
But
that's,
well, especially lease versus
leases,
own.
yeah, you're looking at,
but this is then that's the sewer plant.
Yes.
Okay, not the water plant.
water plant, contractual service, I'm gonna have to look at that. I thought-
And system maintenance water, and I just see, 23, 24, and,
Well, the contractual services for the water plant as well. We have people who run our water plant and our
Right.
sewer plant.
F&V, yeah.
F&B, yeah, so those would go there as well. So the requested budget, we might have to look at that. Did we miss that?
But it's only 25 grand a year
Yeah, we're gonna have
for
to
them?
miss
Yeah,
that.
I thought,
that number-
wasn't,
That's
is that
super
when you said
cheap.
there was stuff that wasn't, oh, I thought that was because the stuff wasn't split right out of the previous year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll have to look at that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we're gonna have to go back because I thought it's listed in another line item.
I thought so too. I thought it was moved.
Next page, water plant contractual services, 310,000. That makes more sense for running an entire water plant.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I knew we moved it.
Yeah, we
Thank you
moved
for
it.
going that. I went back a page, you went forward a page.
Sorry.
yeah, no, it's okay. We went through so many
I
numbers.
just wanted to make
It
sure.
was like
Yeah, yeah.
having to move things.
Oh, yeah, again, and because
And-
it is, should appropriately be listed as a plant
Plant
operation.
operation.
It's not a system operation. They're a
Right.
plant.
Right, it's
Yeah.
listed as system maintenance, not operation.
Right, right.
Got
So
it.
moving it. Yeah. It's a shell game sometimes.
Yeah, I
You're
totally get it.
moving- Yeah, just making sure that it's in the right fund for the chart of accounts for the state.
So, sorry, now we're on water plant fully, right?
Yeah, water plant, yeah, so wages,
Bumped it.
again, this is the DPW supervisor gets charged there and some part-time wages, even though they don't work there. If they're working on a project there, they have to charge there. And then all the fringe, the contractual costs we just talked about, the water monitoring service fees, and then, like equipment repairs, those are all.
And again, you're going to see some updated capital improvement charts that'll come in because we, again, need to start to go out 5, 10, 15, and
Oh, yeah.
20 years. On the water side, we're actually being required by Eagle to now produce a 20-year capital improvement plan. So we're going to do that, we're going to do that for other buildings and facilities, so we're consistent here. So this,
Also in 5-year increments?
in 5-year
Okay,
increments.
yeah, that's
I
good.
mean, if we're required to do it by
Yeah.
Eagle for water, we might as well do
Why
it
not
for
just-
sewer,
right.
and for, it's good planning for us.
I dig it.
All right, so water, sewer, any other questions? And then the fifth tab just has our, other minor accounts that we have set aside. First one's the Guy Center Fund. We have the funds sitting in there from the sale of the Guy Center. The revenue's interest in the bank account.
Yay.
There aren't any projected expenses.
We know there's future
Yep.
action from the commission that'll be
Yep.
necessary.
And you'll see on here, I had to put $1 in, because we have to put $1 in there every year to keep the account from going dormant, so it is
Oh.
an expense that I had to put in there.
Funny.
Yeah, so we have that, interest. The next one is the cemetery fund. You'll see the subtotal is zeroed out. We project revenues, those would be anybody purchasing cemetery burials, foundations, columbarium, niches, those sort of things. You just never know. So we use an estimate on that, and then the transfer in from the general fund to cover the proposed deficit. We have that. The next one, there is some, the cemetery fund does have the expenses for the wages, if the DPW workers have to, you know, dig a grave or cut the grass, or, yeah.
We only got 1,000 there for building repair, and that building's in, the chapel's getting bad. The cement's busted out front, the bushes need to be gone, the trim needs to be replaced, the roof needs to be replaced.
We're gonna identify that,
In your,
even though it's in the cemetery fund, we're gonna have to identify it as
Yeah.
a building and grounds because,
yeah,
as you know, when you're in the cemetery business, what started as initially no perpetual care fund, then some, and then you have, we actually have, it's an interesting little fact real quick, we have as many people buried in that cemetery as we have as residents in our city. Jeff was able to get some statistics and numbers. We're almost even at 4,200 and some. So over that cost, over the time of the cemetery, when there was no money coming in for perpetual care, obviously the city took care of that and covered it with cost. And now look at the cost of burials and those type of things. So the building, we're gonna have to look at, we're going to have to probably do that work under the general fund and actually take from some fund balance and be able to do that because, again, that's how we cover the deficit, we just don't have it,
but I
so.
mean, that particular building, if you can put a metal roof on and the metal trim and the rest of it's block,
Yeah.
it's a matter of just, you know,
I think so.
not requiring a lot of maintenance after that if you can get most of it, but the cement out front of it, going in the doors, bad.
He's looking, we need
Yeah.
some block replacement, we need some tuck pointing.
Yeah.
We need to replace some former windows with glass block, some glass
Yeah.
block that's broken. So he's compiling a list to go together. And this is one that we're going to need to prepare a bid to put out for a contractor to be able to come in and do this work is all one fell swoop. There's just a
Yep.
lot of it that needs to be done,
Okay.
but it's necessary.
Okay.
Are there grants for things like this with cemeteries?
Not usually on cemeteries. Even on historic cemeteries and things are just, it's not there.
Well, I think the Rotary Club at one time had come to the city and said they would paint it and do the trim work on it, but then I think there became a liability.
The dead don't pay taxes.
No.
That's right.
Well, not yet.
Right.
But they pay their dues
And although it may not
over
be,
time, so
you know,
we need to give them a fitting place.
an activity like going to the park with your kids, have walked through there with my kids, and there's so much history in there.
There
And
is.
again,
You know, when you
it's-
just look at the
it's an
stones,
obligation we have.
Styling and
Yep.
detailing.
It's
Yeah.
something we have to
So
do and
ornate.
maintain. We have that obligation, so.
We
Okay.
do odd things like that, but that's what they like to do.
This is kind of a somewhat related question. There's always been this ongoing talk about extending King, and it would go around cemetery, because you can't cut through it and all this. Is there funds there that we could be raising that could go to the cemetery?
That's a different
The
Yeah,
cemetery
it's-
you're thinking
Oh,
of
yeah.
is
That's
right
the
next to
Catholic.
Bell River.
That's
yeah,
the Holy
The
Cross
one
Holy
they're
Cross.
talking
Yeah.
about.
And cemeteries, I mean, are unique. There really isn't a mechanism for us to raise funds other
Maple.
than
Yeah.
perpetual care for new interments, the sale of the niches, the sale of the, you know, it's, and a lot of this is what older communities do have to deal with, because there were either no or very minimal charges, 100 years ago when this was all set up, and you had a lot of sales of family plots that were in there.
Right.
So 6, 8, 10 plots that paid one minimal price and nothing else. And over time, once they're owned, they could be exchanged and sold. So we have a legacy, we have legacy costs there.
But the King Road extension is a different issue, and that was way back when Nagy was here, and they couldn't get it through because the cost was just too high, and they'd have to purchase the property. There is a water line that runs through there. Bill knows because he had to put that in for the Kmart
Pay
project.
for that.
But there's no sewer and all the rest of it, and there was no intention by the city because of the cost to ever finish it.
Would be a county road extension, so then you have to get the cooperation of the county to be able to go forward and take the ownership of that. So,
And it would just go to shortcut anyway, so.
I mean, is it possible? At some point, it's possible, but the funding is gonna be really the key. And when everybody's looking at maintenance versus expansion, extension, unless you were going to have some type of development that would get some state and federal support for infrastructure, and there are some programs. I mean, if we had industrial users that potentially could locate back behind Autocraft and some of the other places that are there now, there's, some transportation economic development funds from the state of Michigan that can be in the millions of dollars to help offset that, but without a project, we don't have.
And we wouldn't be able to transfer that to take care of the cemetery costs anyway.
Yeah, no. Again, a restricted fund only for that purpose.
Thank you.
Yeah, and there's a borderline there too, that Cotterville is part of it back there.
We'll take part of their money to help build it too.
Yeah.
The next one's the drug law enforcement fund. We project revenues about 500, expenditures about 2,000. There is reserves to pull from if needed. Just average cost on this. Jim put this in. Brownfield redevelopment fund recap, separate fund. We project revenues about $47,035. And then paying back out to the county about $27,395,000, which keeps us a balance of $19,640. You'll see the projected the actual activity in 23-24 was higher. We received the revenue from 22-23 after the cutoff date to receive revenue in the next fiscal year in 23-24, so it's doubled 1 year. We didn't get it 1 year in time to collect it for that fiscal year, but it normally is about $47,000. Interest in the bank account is about 35, and then the principal payment and the interest payments there. I'm projecting, I have a copy of the actual brownfield agreement here, and it looks like we pay this till 2031. So,
And then I know there's more discussion that we're likely to have on this as far as compliance and things. The risk of brownfield and the risk of some other tax increment is if there's a failure of the project to go through, and I know it's been a concern with everyone. In most cases, full faith and credit of the municipality has been put out to pay the obligations. So if the project fails, if there's no revenue coming in that are captured to come in on this, often it's municipality that is on the hook for this piece. So, I mean, we want to look a little more into this and find out where we are in this, stability of the project and those type of things.
I thought in this
That
instance, they
brownfield.
had to cover the cost.
Well, I don't know how it's written, and that's the piece. In most cases.
I know I
mean,
remember asking those questions
Yeah.
back then. I
So-
probably have a book on it, but I believe if they didn't cover the cost, they were on the hook
Yeah,
for the
well, and again, I
difference.
think the issue is covering a cost, that there probably is that legal portion that's written into most of the agreements, but if there's a bankruptcy or other things like that, that's when the municipality may, I don't know how. this-
I think they did it that even if they sold the building and somebody else took it over, that they were transferred to that person.
That's common to.
That's as far as I know, that's what this one was.
And I'm not saying that this is the case in this particular project, but you always fear that, if you have a bankruptcy that would occur, how does that then transfer? And is that the obligation is still on the book?
Yeah.
Does the municipality have to cover the obligation if there's nobody to be able to go back in, in a
Yeah.
creditor situation? I don't know.
Is that the hotel? And I think they're in violation of, because the brownfield, because they don't have the 18 employees that they were guaranteed.
That's a separate one. That's the tax break.
Right.
They have two things, the brownfield and the tax break.
So we're taking a look at all of the pieces.
But when brownfields is paid for, we just collect the whole amount, and we owe nothing more to the county, correct?
if we have a surplus, we would keep it, yeah. We keep the surplus. That's what you see here. We'll collect about 47,000, and we only have to pay the 27,000 in the schedule from the brownfield plan.
There's a whole chart. Well, see
Yeah,
if I,
there should be a whole book because.
there is,
There, I have a piece of the chart here,
The
but,
bond.
Yeah.
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 I
Yeah.
probably,
Yeah, so
So-
we have the bond schedule that we're looking at, but we need to look at all the components of the actual agreements that were in place.
I think,
And the two sides. of this.
Right.
I think that, I think I gave you the big book that I had on the,
I
it
did.
should all be in there.
Yeah.
Okay, I have the one, the other pieces in there.
It should all be, yeah, I'm pretty sure it should all be in there, that book.
Right?
That's what we pay to the county. I think that's what we pay.
So just like other properties, this value goes up, we also are collecting more funds on it, and we can hold those,
Right now, we
which
make
we have.
this.
Once it's paid in, 2031, then we can release those funds back out
So we make the whole thing.
to the general fund. But until then, it has to stay in this fund to pay in case of all.
Well, it goes back, and part of it goes back into the brownfield for other projects, yeah.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, the city
The
guarantees
assessed
it.
value.
Right.
yeah. The next one is the capital projects fund recap. We have revenue, interest. So here's interest. This fund's interesting. It's kind of like an in and out fund. We place money here and hold on to it and then move it out. So we kind of been moving money in here for the Sterling truck replacement, and now it's all leaving this year. So that's what, like the past few years, the subtotal is probably a positive number because we were putting money in there to hold, but now we're moving it out.
It's our
So,
savings account.
yeah, yeah. Yep, so that's the Sterling truck, and then the cemetery trust funds, we do have a trust fund when we're out of cemetery funds or we can't, a perpetual type care, but there's not much revenue or expenditures on that. Let's see that. And then that is it.
So I guess if my only question left is on that fee schedule. I know this goes along with the budget, but will we be looking at the portion for the business licenses later, or?
Yeah, so Jason's been working on his recommendations to, we have a couple of items that we don't have yet to be able to plug in there. but we are gonna look at it, so there are some changes. Business license is one piece, we wanna reduce that. We think that the amount compared to other communities is too high. It's really not, it really should be looked at as a revenue source for us, more as an enticement or incentive for businesses to be able to locate, open, and survive and flourish in the community. And on the other side, conversely, there are some other funds that we have that haven't been, or other fees that haven't been updated in years that need to have minor adjustments. So we just had that whole volume that, it's in pretty good shape. There were a couple little pieces that were kind of gap filling to get back to you guys for the final adoption piece. So you have the fee schedule in advance for that. And again, fee schedule, we've reflected, our best guesstimates in the budget, but that all depends on the number of activities we have. I do think that the side step that we talked a little about earlier is we have to have a deeper dive and discussion on building, planning, zoning. That is really something I think that is more of a separate workshop meeting discussion, because there are a lot of moving pieces. And in order to answer questions in the budget, we have to answer other bigger foundational pieces for it.
On the fee schedule, there is, just a heads up, really, the water meter rates that through the DPW. We didn't get the quotes from the meter company till today, so those will be increasing as well. Just looking for some clarification from the DPW, got them late in the day today, if all these costs get passed on or just a portion, because this quote's pretty long, so we'll update those. And
I know it's late. I appreciate everybody's time and patience and understanding. I don't want to add more to your plate, but I do want to circle back on the building side of things. When we look at the fee schedule, we may in fact find that the fees in the schedule for certain building permits and activities are appropriate. We may, again, have to look structurally at the contractual agreement we have and some other pieces. So I guess I want to clarify that. We may not have certain fees that are out of line compared to other communities, but we may have a structural and I guess operational component that has to have more law.
on our contractual piece
Yeah.
with our.
But the
Yeah.
fees, again, maybe it's how we're dispersing, how we're splitting those, that I think are going to be the bigger discussion for us,
Yep.
if that makes sense.
Yep.
So-
Yeah, because the reality is, if you increase the fees, but then the structure stays the same, you're still only getting a percentage.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
And we're not providing a lot of service
yeah.
for what we're
And I
charging.
know I do 3 units, and I'm in every one of them every day.
I know the other piece, again, that I think we're missing right now is we are not perhaps applying proper fee structure for site plan zoning review. We have to do that. We either have to do it direct or portion direct, or we have to send to a planning consultant or an engineer to look at. We need to look at those pieces. I mean, if a developer's coming in, we don't want to be in a position of pushing away good quality development, but we also can't be in a position of subsidizing the development on the backs of our taxpayers and residents by paying for engineering fees and reviews. So I think we have to look at the structure of a site plan portion and what that review cost is too. And that's kind of what I'm trying to gather now is information from other communities of how do we cover those costs? Because again, it's not just a building zoning piece here. We need engineers to look at the projects and make sure that we have the proper sizing that's indicated on the plans, and that cost should be borne by the developer, not by the municipality to do that.
Alrighty.
Any, like, major
Auto gas.
questions or discussion or?
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, thank you all. I mean, and I don't
Thank you.
know,
You're welcome.
Lots of
it's
hours.
different than what some of you are
bet.
used to in the past. but
It works.
We really, hope that we answered, the main questions you had, and if you have more, we're gonna answer those questions. This is online for the public. We do have copies here. Copy went to the library. We want people to look and ask questions. For the majority of the public that look at this, and this is like reading hieroglyphics, but if they have basic questions and things that we can help drive answers to, that's what we're here for, to try to give them.
Do I need the motion then to move this forward for the public presentation? Or to
We should have
public
a
hearing?
motion to set We could do it at the, I don't know if we have it on the agenda for the 18th. I think we do.
No, we do not.
Yeah.
You would need a motion tonight to just, I guess, to accept the,
To accept and set the
24,
public hearing
25.
For May,
Budget is presented.
accept it as presented, and then we should formalize with setting the public hearing in accordance with the city charter for the May 2nd commission meeting.
And I did just check that too, Scott. It is May of each year, shall by resolution adopt a budget. Does not say first meeting in May.
Okay.
So we could do it second one as well with,
Oh, okay.
with the timeframe,
Why
if
don't we
needed.
why don't we give ourselves some portion of that if you're not ready to set, I mean, I think if we're in good shape, then we can do an
We have
adoption.
to
know we're always
publish it and all that other
Yeah.
stuff, yeah.
Yeah, but if you had other questions that came up, we needed to make changes on, we have the ample time to be able to do that.
Okay.
So perhaps listing on the May 2nd agenda, we will put establishing public hearing for, and we'll do that at the last meeting in May,
Is it May 18th,
Would be the 16th.
16th?
if that sounds like a good approach.
Or you can always hold a special meeting for
Right.
the budget.
I think that gives us, I mean, really, that gives us a month plus to be able to make any modifications, tweaks, and changes that would be
People can look
necessary.
at
I mean, it's pretty solid, and it, as you can see, there's not a lot of movement or wiggle room in there, there just isn't a lot extra to move around. But if we do need to shore up some pieces, we have the opportunity to be able to do that, so.
Okay.
Okay.
And I think the other thing is too, we would have that ordinance change for water and sewer rates, which require first reading and second reading adoption, which should coincide with the adoption of the budget.
Correct, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right, anybody want to make that motion?
Motion that we accept the 2024, 2025 budget as proposed for a public hearing on May 18th. Am I getting this correct? Or May 16th, sorry.
May, are we going to do it May 2nd?
16.
May 16th.
I think we'll.
May 2nd's the announcement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We will again announce it then, but we will, and we have to publish it. That gives us time to be able to meet publication, so we'll be fine for the 16th.
Support.
Okay. Motion and support. Can I get roll call, please?
Everybody.
Commissioner Bryce,
Yes.
Commissioner Hendrick,
Yeah.
Commissioner Clausen,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Brien,
Yes.
Commissioner Rory,
Yes.
Commissioner Ross,
Yes.
Mayor Vandembosch.
Yes.
That motion carried.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Support.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
You don't even have to ask that, Jen.
Carries.